Both sides.
And I will let you know when our YouTube is going.
It says the webinar is now live streaming on YouTube. Mine says we're now live streaming. Jill?
All right, let me, just about there on this end.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, so it's what's 12:02. It's April 15th, 2021, and this is the regular monthly meeting of the Missoula Redevelopment Agency over Zoom, and I guess live on YouTube. The board is present, minus Nancy, who is unable to be with us today. We've got a lot of people interested in today's meeting. So those who didn't hear this, if you're not, when we come to an item and if you're not involved in that item or don't want to comment on it or anything, would you please keep your video off? Is that right, Jill?
Yes, please.
Yes. Yeah, and so that way we don't, you know, screw things up with too many people on video. If and then if you are here to make any public comments, which we'll take generally in a minute, and then we'll specifically on action items when they come up, Jill will now put up on the screen how you do that.
Has everybody seen the public comment?
So when we call for public comment, you can raise your hand virtually by computer, click the participants button, and then click the raise hand, and by phone, press 9 to raise and lower your hand, and we'll recognize you. Okay? So with that, I'll ask if there are any public comments or announcements concerning matters that aren't on the action item agenda. Jill? Anybody raising their hand?
Let me stop here. Let me see.
No?
I don't see anybody.
All right, then if not, we'll go to our first action item, which is Scott Street Property Development Plan. Chris, you are up.
All right, we'll see if this works this time. We struggled a little bit earlier. So the Scott Street property on the in the North Reserve Scott Street Urban Renewal District has been before the board several times, either as action or as informational. So I'll just quickly summarize the background as the former lumber finish mill. On the site for about 100 years, contaminated soils on the north end of their site and other places. After a long process, half of that parcel, which is on the new picture here, is that big blank area north of the White Pine site, White Pine buildings. Half of that was cleaned up to residential standards, and the back half, about 9 acres, was cleaned up. It was being cleaned up to commercial industrial standards. In the latter part of latter part of 2020, the city purchased those 19 acres, labeled here Parcel A and Parcel B, using, or through MRA, using a tax increment bond. The dream for that, or the vision for that, and the purchasing it, was to, number one, try to create a model relatively dense but livable neighborhood on the parcel A. And then be able to use parcel B to expand and consolidate city shops from their location just south of parcel B and other places in the city, as well as the stuff that's up north of parcel B. See a large, kind of strangely shaped vacant parcel with big bumps on it. That's big piles of street millings and gravel and so on. All those get moved and put in sheds and so on, allowing that to be developable also. The administration talked to several people about trying to figure out a way to develop this, and they ended up working with Rivara, which is a LLC that has sole membership is GoodWorks here in Missoula, whose primary business is actually working on housing problems in Western Montana. They are represented here today by Kai Hochstetler and Don McGee. They in turn have partnered with Interurban Development, which is owned by Rob Brewer, and he's including Bob Boyce in this project, which is a real estate development firm that's done projects throughout the Northwest and in Washington, D.C. The letter of intent that was entered into the city as part of the sales process of this piece of land to Rivara describes the objectives of the development in terms of its ability to creatively put together a dense but livable neighborhood, but also include perhaps neighborhood level retail and other service opportunities on about 2/3 of that property, about 6 acres. And the reason I'm going back and forth on how big the property is at some point there's going to be streets in there, and that's going to shrink it down just a bit. Approximately 3 acres will be given to a community land trust and for permanently affordable housing. That's the model for that MRA has worked with in the past would be Clark Fork Commons, just upstream of the Russell Street Bridge, and more recently the Lee Gordon Place on East Front Street. There will, according to the LOI, there will also be a daycare facility of at least 6,000 square feet in the 6-acre development. And the reason for that is that's one of the primary issues that the North Side neighborhood has come up with in terms of livability in their neighborhood. And one of the intent here is not only to make this denser than that neighborhood, but also make it feel like it's part of the neighborhood. So there's an architectural vision here that somebody's going to have to come up with to make that happen and make everything seem like it all belongs in the same place. So the development plan that we're talking about today is one that is in the letter of intent, says, and other documents that says that MRA will finance a master plan or development plan for this parcel that will go through Rivara, the eventual owner. That seems like kind of a strange way to put things together, but it is specifically authorized in urban renewal law, and we've worked with that most. I think the best example that's closest to this one would be the master development plan for the old sawmill district. MRA financed that. It was pretty much run by the developer with a lot of oversight by MRA and other departments of the city. So what it does is it allows MRA and the city to be able to oversee what's going on, making sure that the vision that was originally part of this deal goes through and becomes a reality. And that has worked obviously with the old sawmill district, and I think that it'll work well here. The development plan for parcel A would include the complete layout, of course, of all the utilities and so on, and as well as the vehicular connections, bicycle connections, and so on. A shared use of parking with that city parcel, parcel B, is also part of that, and as well as transportation analyses of other current and potential developments in the area. You can see straight north of Rivara is Scott Street Village. North of that other block is the 200 units of Bellagio. The city parcel is intended probably for another relatively dense development that will likely be modeled after the Rivara piece. And you can see there's other vacant property in there in that area owned by MRL, who is interested in at least keeping an eye on this and seeing if it's a direction they want to go in the future as far as development as a neighborhood. All those combined will create different kinds of traffic patterns. So that the assignment here is for the WGM portion of the development team, which is Cushing Terrell, I should have mentioned that earlier, to be able to look at this whole little holistically because of the very limited access in and out of that neighborhood, either over Scott Street Bridge or through neighborhood streets to Orange Street or way down the other end on Reserve Street. So we're going to have to kind of forecast what's going to happen so we can figure out how to mitigate those developments or the impact of the developments into the future, because as we know, and we'll find out again later, doing transportation projects costs a lot of money. Just as one of the things is you drive by that piece of property and you don't think about, I mean, you look at it and it's just kind of vacant and there's a few weeds out there. Scott Street Village is a little oasis, but when you look at this from a different pattern, I love this picture because it shows that once you get up a floor or two, you're going to have some amazing views. It's definitely part of the neighborhood that's just sort of cut off by Scott Street and it's past. I did want to show you a couple of pictures of projects that Interurban has been involved in. Oh, that didn't work. This one here, this is in Portland, just on the kind of the south area of Portland. It was a redevelopment project from a YMCA to the Under Armour headquarters. I believe this is in Spokane.
It is.
One of the ideas of the why they went with Cushing Terrell is their ability to be able to come up with unique kinds of products, both for housing and trying to mix in the mixed use. What we're aiming after here is what a planner in Northern California in a book has termed the missing middle, which is products that were built in the middle of the last century for modest to moderate income folks, just working families, that just are not being built in a cohesive fashion. We see some of those things scattered around Missoula right now, but not in a cohesive fashion, well planned out so that it all works together. And that's the intent here. This particular development in Durango is one that I know that they're proud of, and we've done a little bit of research on it too. And it's a fascinating piece that's associated with the Ute tribe in that area that is under development now and is working real well. So staff recommendation is to approve the selection of Cushing Terrell as the Parcel A Development Plan Manager at a cost to MRA of up to $226,160, and direct MRA staff to prepare all the necessary documents between MRA and Rivara to be executed by the board chair. The reason I didn't call it a development agreement is I'm not really quite sure right now what that document will be. It will be an agreement of sorts that spells out the schedule and the deliverables to MRA and the city so that we can keep those kind of oversights. I will say that there's a major, and I missed this, very important, a major component of the planning process will be interaction with the north side and to a certain extent west side neighborhoods, so they can assess the impacts to their neighborhoods, and they can be part of the planning process along the way. I'm done.
Okay. Anything to add from the developers? Chris?
Did you have anything? Go ahead, Don.
Yeah, this is Dawn McGee from Good Works Ventures. Just a couple of things. Chris had mentioned that we are focused on development. We have moved into the development space recently because we've been working on Good Works in and around Montana for 15, 16 years through various enterprises of economic development and the like. Housing has created a critical issue in our communities, both in Missoula and elsewhere. And people's ability to continue to hire good people is affected by their inability to find housing. And we've been working with the city over the past 7 months to try to put together a project in the probably most unforgiving of times to try to build anything. We have a slide we might show you, which shows that a cost of OSB and 2x4s, two of the most critical ingredients for build out, 2x4s have increased by more than doubled again in price in 1 year. And OSB is 3 times the amount that it cost at the beginning of last year. So we're in a pretty intensive environment with which to try to accomplish this project, but we're hopeful about being able to provide some housing so that people could stay in Missoula who are wanting to and who are otherwise losing their houses because they're being turned into Airbnbs or sold out from underneath them, or just unable to afford a house, where we've seen houses that have had multiple cash offers above asking repeatedly over the course of the last 6 months. And so you can just have a quick highlight at the screenshot of what we're up against in terms of build prices, but we still feel pretty confident that we've got the right team in place to put together a really solid development for this neighborhood.
Okay, thanks. Anybody
And
else?
I'll jump in there too. I mean, really, with where this is at, you know, this project, without the city's support, delivering 70 permanently affordable homes for ownership in Missoula would not be possible. I mean, this is in its truest sense a public-private partnership, and we're really, you know, we're digging in, we're setting standards for what can be done in an area and permanently affordable home ownership at scale. And so from both city and MRA's perspective, thank you for supporting this, and we couldn't do it without that support.
Okay. Okay, question. Yeah, Ruth.
First of all, I'd like to say thank you for considering this in terms of missing middle. I think that advocates these days are not talking about affordable housing so much as housing that people can afford, which is a little bit different, because certainly there's a screaming need for housing for low income, but there's a need for housing at virtually all levels in Missoula. As you pointed out, Dawn, companies that want to hire people that need to move to Missoula can't find a place to live no matter how much they make. So I appreciate that focus on that segment of the socioeconomic ladder. I have a question about the process by which you determined Cushing Terrell would be the partners on this, or the consultants on this.
Thanks, Ruth. We started off with the city was keen on using the people who wrote the book, The Missing Middle Housing. It's called Opticos Design, and they're based out of Berkeley. And we basically were working with the city to get them to do the master planning of the project. And when it came down to putting numbers together, their numbers far exceeded what anybody at MRA or we expected to see. And they had several limiting factors, like they wanted to own the design work, which we were paying for, and they wanted to charge us per housing unit. Like, just some other things came up that were untenable for us moving forward with them. So we kind of went back to the drawing board and said, okay, and we had been looking for a local architect to pair with Opticos to move the project ahead. But we went back and revisited with all the architects we'd already sat down with and said, hey, what if you all were the ones to steward this from the entire master planning process going forward? What would that look like? And we put together a pretty comprehensive RFP with numbers of questions. And Rob, you might want to speak to this. And we got back various responses, none of which were particularly complete, and some of which were just not where we wanted to be at all, meaning they were bid out at time and materials, and we were looking for a fixed price. So in the end, after we went back to each of the people we'd invited to apply on the RFP, which included Opticos at that point, Cushing Terrell just rose to the top of the heap for lots of reasons. They've had extensive experience doing master planning and design work. They've got a large enough team that they can actually pull together all of this. And Rob, do you want to put any other color on that?
Yeah, it basically came down to them being really the most qualified. We kind of lost about 2 months during that Opticos process, and so we put together an RFP that was I think a very complete analysis of it. Chris and Ellen both took a look at it, and we sent it out to everyone on the list, like Don was saying. And really what was helpful from my perspective is that David Kuhl from then CTA and I worked together on a project in Spokane. That was a great project. It was renovating an old, about a 70,000 square foot building on the Spokane River that was on a brownfield site. And then actually today they're building part of the University of Washington Medical School on that same site. So just had a very good experience with them. We wanted to have a local group involved in the process. It felt like there was a little bit too much distance between Missoula and Berkeley, California, for a variety of reasons. One of my biggest concern with all of this kind of all along the way is, and I probably sound like a broken record to some people, is we don't want to design something that we can't build. And we've worked with architects in different markets before, and it's pretty amazing. It's tough to really understand budgets unless you're local. And we got a little leery of that. So the process could have been to go through something like, Opticos or whatever, and then pick a designer for the CLT portion or the multifamily portion. It really felt like it would be best to for cost reasons and for streamlining the whole schedule, to keep everybody on the same page. And Cushing Terrell really became the obvious one. So that's really the basis behind the hope to move forward with them.
Thank
We
you.
also have
So
Cushing Terrell on the line they've got a few examples and slides to show if you'd like to see those. Probably go ahead and pop those up.
Just definitely saying yes, but could I ask a follow-up question first? Which is,
Sure.
So I have confidence in Cushing Terrell, certainly, and especially after your comments. And it sounds like maybe, I don't know if Chris and Ellen, or if there were other people from the city who were involved in the scoring or reviewing those RFPs, and it sounds like Chris and Ellen did review them, or were part of that team that chose Cushing Terrell. Am I correct?
Right. We both looked at the RFP, as did Dale Bickle in the mayor's office. Before it went out, the actual request for proposals, to make sure it included the kinds of things, just to double check it was fine. Double check that it included the vision that we wanted to see. Also, we were able to look at all the responses and came up with questions and so on. That there was a series of interviews with each one of these folks. Don and Kai are making it sound a little bit short-circuited, but they were scrambling for 6 weeks there, trying to put together the right, make sure that they had all the questions asked and be sure that they were selecting the best group. That's the process is similar to what the city would have to go through by state law, and it followed that process pretty closely. We generally don't do multiple interviews and try to pull out more. We expect things up front, but I think it was really important that that Rivara feel very comfortable with the folks that they're going to be working with and are going to create this for them. And I think they are, and I think we're very comfortable with them too.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I just want to say that I also appreciate that some of it will go into that community land trust that will be permanently affordable for lower income. I also really appreciate that you're looking at parking and the transportation pattern. I have friends who live on the north side, just off of Scott Street, who are very concerned about the traffic that is already there with people going to the dump or with the trucks going to the dump, and also just the construction that's going to be happening at Bellagio and any construction that happens on this site, let alone the people that will ultimately be moving in there. So I know there's just a lot of concern there. And so I appreciate that that was included in the RFP to look beyond just the borders of that parcel A and consider the whole community. I don't think there's an easy answer to that. I know it's going to cost a lot of money. I don't know where that's going to come from. And I don't think it's going to, I don't expect it to happen in the near future that there would be additional transportation routes. But thank goodness we're looking at that as part of this development. I thank you very much for that.
Okay,
Those are my comments.
others? So Chris, I'm a little confused about just the sort of the chronology here. So the city bought the property, divides it in two, and then markets parcel A or B, A, I guess, right? And
Right.
then,
It's not officially divided yet. We're going to have to get that line figured out. But yes, essentially, yes, exactly.
okay, and then Good Works Development indicates the interest but they haven't bought it, have they?
There is a sales agreement in place that is contingent on this planning process, I think, pretty much coming together.
So the sales agreement is contingent on what happens after the planning process?
Well, what happens?
The results of the planning process?
The planning process needs to bring out they have a letter of intent set forth several different things that the city wanted to see out of this piece of property, and that Rivara not only agreed to, they came up with several of them. And so that those criteria, if you will, have to be checked off during the planning process, that we are putting together a project of the type that I described, and with the variety of housing, the targeted population met, the design, and so on, and the daycare. And so once those boxes are checked, then the conditions of the sales agreement are met.
I think at the end of the day, Carl, we're looking at this as basically doing the massing project to figure out what the design and scope are going to be for both the CLT and the multifamily. As you all are aware, this is in an opportunity zone, so we have to, once we've gotten the massing blocks put together and we understand what kind of form and function we will be doing, we'll be really drilling down on our spreadsheets even further to make sure that the return profile is acceptable to the OZ investor, and that we are able to move ahead in this environment with, like I said, the cost of inputs being just astronomical right now, to be able to deliver the quality product that both the city and the people of the North Side are looking for.
Okay, so we go through this process, something gets developed. I mean, the plan gets developed. Then walk me through what happens at that point. Chris or Dawn, or maybe Dawn, maybe you're I don't, whoever.
Yeah, so really the next step is, after we've completed the the design process is what it's called, is we come back, we look at the cost inputs to deliver on the community land trust portion of it. We return with a TIF request to bring those portions in and develop that side of it. Also, there's the creation of the parcel of the unique tract for sale is done through the right-of-way process. So we're not using a subdivision process there, we're using right-of-way. Thus, it's not an individual tract, as Chris referred to.
Well, that's okay. I want to know about the development, and then, you know, what we're buying. I guess, you know, part of my question really is what we're buying into long term.
Yeah, so the 70 permanently affordable units for home ownership are held on the community land trust. Those are targeting, per the LOI, between 100 and 120% AMI. I can, as of this year's numbers, I can share the screen if you'd like to see what those sales prices look like on a per unit family household income level. But we're really looking between $250,000 and $340,000 is the range that those houses will be sold for, depending on the folks that go into those houses in terms of the number of people that go in there. And so we're pricing within that range. And then, it's, as Dawn mentioned, back to the number crunching after the design process to make sure that we can make the math work and deliver on this.
And then on the multifamily side, again, Rob can speak to this further, but we are obviously going to try to incorporate as much community comments as possible. One of the questions that we're sitting down with what's called the North Side, West Side crew this afternoon to talk about their concerns and things that they want to see happen. One of the things that everyone has expressed concern about is traffic and what's going to happen. So we're trying to find out the answer to why are you leaving a neighborhood? What can we possibly put on the site that might keep you in the neighborhood so that there's not in and out traffic? And, just to try to meet as many community demands. So far we have built in for sure the daycare, and we're looking, other things have been mentioned, a small grocery, some food services, coffee, perhaps, as you all are aware, the North Side really has no services at all, except for the Conoco station and the soup kitchen that's out on Russell Street right now. Orange Street, sorry. So what kind of services could we actually put in that would actually be neighborhood amenities to keep people within the neighborhood so that they're not leaving and coming back across that Scott Street Bridge? And then Rob, why don't you talk about what your development process would be on the multifamily part?
Right. So after we get the masking study done and we understand the site a lot better, I mean, normally a developer would come in and just say, we've got 6 acres that we want to plunk down 400 units in, and they just start doing their own kind of internal planning. But this one's made more complicated, but for a good reason. And that's the CLT piece. It's also trying to integrate a daycare component to it. And one of the questions that Ruth, you were kind of alluding to, is about traffic and people staying within the neighborhood. Our hope is that we can actually encourage people in the neighborhood and in this development to stick around and provide some of the services. So like Don mentioned, a grocery store, a couple of we did a project in Portland called Pine Street Market. You can see that at pinestreetpdx.com if you want to look at it, but it's a 9-restaurant, little in kind of market hall concept that was a fun, great project to do. And we think we can do something similar to that, but maybe sort of just as people might leave their food cart and come up, but not want to be to a big, huge restaurant space, that'd be in kind of an interim space. But a lot of that, we just need to get through this exploration period to better understand it. Our goal is to build 240 apartment units. And I tend to be I like market rate apartments. I think if we, effectively got more market rate apartments, we'd end up with a lot more affordable housing units too. But that's just sort of part of a bigger economic picture. This one, we'd have a wide range of market rate apartments. So we'd have some that are that go to a different income level than, we think market rate is not just one rate, it's a spectrum of rates. So we'd want to accomplish that. We want to accomplish that as part of the goal. We definitely want to have parking. We want to figure out how to make it so that the neighborhood feels like it's comfortable or nobody's flooding the neighborhood with additional cars. But the city has said that they're willing to look at sort of an overlap of parking where we could use, they may have some extra parking that we could use. They could use some of our parking at different times. And I think the city's really been pretty energetic and flexible about different ideas that could help make the project have less of an impact in the neighborhood. And we certainly want to work with that. The city has said they'll be at our community meetings to help make sure that the neighborhood understands that there are lots of goals for helping with that in the long run. So we hope it feels like a bit of a park, that there's some definitely some outdoor spaces, community spaces, maybe some fire pits, there are a lot of strange things that people have done. And I think between our group and Cushing Terrell, we can come up with some pretty innovative ideas. And part of it is we hope that it inspires other development in the neighborhood and maybe in other parts of Missoula, Montana, and the Northwest to do just some different ways of thinking about the process of developing. So the next step after that would be engaging with an architect. And we've got a couple of contractors that we've selected. I've always found it really, really important to have a contractor involved in the process very early on, because it's very easy to get going down a pathway and designing something that you can't build. And so having the architect and the engineers and the contractors all involved at the beginning helps figure out what costs and what path makes the most sense. So anyway, that's sort of our process in a nutshell.
So thank you. If I may, Carl, we're
Yeah, please.
Okay. So once you get started on this, and then you have to, as Kaya said, dig down into those spreadsheets and start to figure out, can you, with the prices going up the way they are, and who knows what's going to happen over the next couple of years with demand, et cetera. If it looks like, oh my gosh, we can't afford to build this unless we can put in 90 units instead of 70, or this just isn't going to work, we still end up with the plan that we are paying for that includes that shared parking, that includes streets, and includes some transportation options. The city would still end up with some, at least some of that plan would be usable for some other development. Is that correct? I mean, that's sort of a worst case scenario for me. I don't mean to be a downer
Yeah,
about this, but
I think you're right for sure. I mean, one
because
of
I
the
want it to succeed, especially that daycare. There's a need all over town for that.
The answer is yes, Ruth.
yeah, that's for sure.
Yes, we'll
But
end up.
isn't the idea that the plan,
basis.
we're flexible enough at this point that that's, I mean, that is a true worst case scenario, right?
That is absolutely what we want to avoid for sure. I mean,
Right. So I mean, if you get in the middle of the plan and you need 100 rather than 50 apartments, then that will, and that's clear, then what happens? I mean, then the plan changes, doesn't it? Or not?
it could. I mean, it may be that the building type changes. So, instead of doing a 4/1, which might be a concrete podium plus 4 stories of wood structure, it may just be a 4 or 5 story wood structure, or it could be changed to light gauge steel, or it could be that we have to do a taller building, or shorter buildings. There's all kinds of different, maybe townhouses, it may be kind of other forms. And I think Cushing Tail can kind of address that, but that's ultimately why we want to get everybody going now and get the contractor on board, because we don't want to get into planning something that we can't build because nobody was paying attention to cost.
Yeah, Ellen.
Yeah, I think one of the things we don't want to lose sight of is that we really are trying to facilitate a different kind of development pattern in Missoula than what we typically see, because we control the land and because it's in an urban renewal district and possibly because it's in an opportunity zone. We have the tools to do that. So the last thing we want is to come up with a plan that's not buildable anywhere because it's not realistic. But what, the goal is to come out with a model that maybe could be used on West Broadway, that maybe could be used to some extent on Johnson Street on the MRL property. So I think this is this needs to be looked at as bigger than just this Scott Street project.
Okay.
It is a new development pattern that we're paid to have created.
Okay. Keith, you had something, and would you identify?
Yes. Yes, thanks very much. My name is Keith Walzak. I'm with Cushing Terrell, and sorry about the background noise. I'm in a coffee shop, so I apologize. And I'll be on the job site.
Car with your dog. I mean, that's a step up.
Yes. Yeah. Well, hopefully he's not driving too. So a couple things. I am the person that worked on the for 5 years the Three Springs neighborhood project in Durango, Colorado, and I think it's a good project for you all to look at, because as I'm hearing the conversations, it's very applicable. This Three Springs project in Durango was funded by the Southern Ute Indian tribe, but it was definitely a market-driven project, and there were certain metrics set aside to make sure that project was successful. One, there was market rate housing, there was affordable housing, and there was attainable housing target goals. And it's a 700-acre project designed over multiple phases. So there's a couple things that I'd love to be able to talk with you all about and explain more of the details of that particular project, because I think there's a lot to learn from that project. One of those things is that when we talk about shared parking really only works when you have employment, daytime employment that can then share the nighttime uses on the project. So while it's all good to talk about childcare and restaurants, what's really good is to find appropriate neighborhood micro employment opportunities that can then truly share the parking slots from daytime to nighttime. So that's something to keep in mind. Number two, we're not only working with Rob and Chris and Dawn and Kai on the 9 acres, we as designers are thinking about that 100 acres beyond. And so we're going to look at ideations to think about, well, what will this entire area look like over the course of the next 15 years or so? So we're not going to be very specific about one 9-acre area. It's the whole thing. How does it all work together over time? And that's really, really important because it affects circulation, it affects open spaces, it affects product type, whether there's some employment opportunities. So that's something that we do all the time as designers. And then thirdly, what are the tools like design guidelines and codes and standards, form-based codes? What are those tools that the planners can use to actually make sure that the quality of development and the urban form meets the standards that you decide upon in the early visioning process? And so if the city already has design guidelines, great. If they don't, it's something that we want to talk about and try to make sure we have the right tools to.
Okay, well, we've lost them.
Coffee shop.
Right. Ruth, did you have something else?
Yeah, I just want to say that's one of the things I appreciated in the comments so far, and also in the memo, is that this is a broader look, that it goes beyond this 9-acre parcel.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things that I really liked about it, and I thank you for that, Keith and Dawn. Okay.
Okay, so I mean, the bottom line is that the idea is to spend this money to produce a plan that meets the city's goals and that is realistic and is doable, right?
Yes.
Okay. And then, as Ellen says, a model for maybe how this is done other places. So the risks that it doesn't work are what?
I think the risk is that we end up as the opposite of what Rob said. We end up with a product that we cannot be built at this time, or I suppose there's other things that could happen, such as Don and Kai decide to become monks in Tibet, and we lose that master developer. I mean, I think in the end, I think the worst case scenario is that we have a workable plan that we'll be able to work with other developers in the future. I think that ultimately, I think that's the worst case, that we've spent money that may not be in a plan that may not be realized in the short term. It may take a longer term.
I think if I could add to that a little bit, I mean, the crapshoot here is that we are looking, as Dawn and Kai pointed out, we're looking at escalating construction costs, big time. It's not minor. It's the worst I've seen ever. And so, you know, if we could delay this and wait until things stabilize and settle down, but at the end of the day, we need product on the ground. We have a housing crisis in Missoula at the same time that we have escalating construction costs. So I think as staff, our recommendation is we move ahead with this. We get our model. If this craziness continues and just gets totally out of hand, maybe we can't build it next year. You know, but we at least have the fabric and the foundation done, and it can be built when it's feasible to build it. Hopefully this is going to settle down and we'll find somewhere to get wood from.
Are the conditions in the letter of intent flexible enough to allow for changes in scale, or if that's the right word, to account for the reality of trying to build something like this, you know, within a few years after the plan's done?
Yeah, I'm happy to just touch on that, and Chris may want to elaborate, but we have a letter of intent that I think does have a fair amount of flexibility built into it, because we know we're in kind of a time when that's needed. But that'll be followed by a development agreement when way more things are known and pinned down, and that will get into the real time commitments that are hard, or the form of the development that is etched in stone, if you will, to the degree that it can be. So it's, you know, we've got the letter of intent, which kind of lays the groundwork, but it will be followed with the same kind of development agreement that you're used to seeing on other projects. And Chris, jump in there if I didn't do that right.
Oh, you're actually exactly right. And yes, it is. I was just looking it up just to zip through it pretty quickly. Dale Bickle wrote most of it with our input. And it looks like right now that there's ways to both tweak the process and the criteria as we move along, but also to be able to make some processes to make more major changes.
Okay, Joshua?
I'm going to put you on the spot, Rob and Don. Maybe Rob more in particular, but I understand that these agreements that are yet to be entered into would provide some opportunities to escape if the costs of construction look unachievable. However, is it true that you have at least preliminary penciled this out and think that this is possible? I'm looking for some hope here.
Yes, for sure. I mean, we've invested a lot of time in this already, and we've put together pro formas, and we've had conversations with contractors, and we've had, most of our conversations we've had even with the architects are, do you think you can design this thing within budget? Can we get it constructed? And let's not design something that is so outlandish that we'll never get it built. And, that just comes down to all kinds of things. Some of it is if I think the question was a few minutes ago, whether or not there's kind of the ability to build something that maybe is a little bit bigger or a little bit smaller. I mean, all of these things start factoring into the development of a project. And what gets most frustrating about projects is that we're always designing into the next economy. So this thing is going to be likely started, within the next year, but it'll take 18 months to build it. So we're talking about something that's quite a distance off into the future, 20 months. So how do we make sure that what we're designing right now fits into that? And some of it is we got to build a little bit of flexibility into it. We've got to really understand the market. We've got to watch which direction wood products are going. And we have to make sure that we can switch back and forth between different products. But yes, we put a lot of time and energy into this, and we would not be here if we didn't think we could build it. And yes, I recognize that if just because 2x4s are up in price or OSB is up in price, those are small components of the project. The big components are labor, and hopefully we'll see more labor availability, but because of some of the policies of the last 4 years, we've gotten into a bind with labor, unfortunately. So hopefully those will be changing, and it appears as though that's happening. There's some good indications in some of the bigger cities that the construction costs are at least leveling out, and in some cases maybe actually declining a little bit. It used to be that we'd always factor in a 5 or a 10% kind of additional escalation fee into project costs, and in this case, we have, but I'm hoping that we get to be stabilized, because too much further and the affordability problem will just get more and more astronomical. And some of this really just is more of a part of the housing crisis we have is actually a zoning crisis, is that we just don't have the available land. We don't get the process moving fast enough. We get so burdened down by the bureaucracy of things that we're just trying to come up with ideas. You can't get a zone change for 2 years, and then you start that 20-month process. So yes, we have done a lot of work. I think the pro formas are good. They're solid. They've been given a lot of contingency. Along the way, I know that Cushing Terrell will agree, if we get into a place where we have to add 50 units to make it more economical, to spread out the costs of deployment and general conditions and the cost of the land, and that's something we'd want to do, and we'd want to be in having these conversations with the city.
And best case scenario time frame?
Well, maybe that's more up to Cushing Terrell. I don't know if Dave, depends on so we have a process to go through to get to what the city wants, and that's an understanding of massing and our the whole project master plan. And like Keith was saying, that incorporates a lot of other areas, which means it incorporates a lot of neighborhood input and community input, and those are important components of it. That's probably a 4 to 6 month process. Then if we are ready to go and everything seems like it's a go, then we've got to get that contractor kind of working a lot more diligently to refine numbers, and then we'll get going with the true construction documents, the permit documents. I don't know how that, probably about 6 more months. Is that right, David or Keith?
Yeah, the biggest driver on the schedule right now is 2 or 3 of us need to get up to the site and look at and get going. But COVID shots, vaccinations, so we want to get this to happen right now, so we can actually do an in-person meeting and kick off I think the 15th or 16th of May. We anticipate doing a 3-month visioning master planning process, and we'll be able to somewhere in between that phase as Rob was saying, bring on a GC that's selected or GCs, so we can engage them during that process, and then we can have the concept development master plan wrapped up in 4 months, and we could actually then start. David can then start rolling in and doing some of the design work as well. So these tasks are not they're overlapping with each other to create some efficiencies.
And we hope to get going on some utility and grade work and figuring out the road systems and things like that early on, getting in through permit. And it's likely an 18-month construction project.
Okay, Ruth.
Yeah, and while we're talking about timeframes, it occurs to me that in terms of coming at like acquiring the property, coming up with a master plan, which is on maybe a mini master plan compared to say the North Reserve Scott Street master plan, et cetera. This is actually something that is going to move pretty fast, for our typical time frame, and I'm kind of excited about that. We will see results from this master plan, I believe. I wanted to know worst case scenario because it is tax dollars, but I think best case scenario is more likely to happen. So I like it.
All right.
Just-
Yes, Mel.
If I unmute quick enough, I just wanted to quickly thank you, Don and Kai, for entering into this aspect of work, entering into housing. Good Works has been doing good work in Western Montana for years, and we're so lucky and grateful to have you, and you put together a great team to work on this. And I'm ready to make a motion when you are, but I think Chris was about to say something, so I won't be too aggressive here.
I'm just going to mention one of the questions I was expecting and it didn't come was, well, what happens to the money when they buy this property from the city? The money actually, in accordance with the LOI, goes into the Housing Trust Fund.
Okay. All right. So unless there are other questions, is there a motion?
Yes, I'd like to move that the board approve the Rivera LLC selection of Cushing Terrell as the Parcel A Development Plan Designer at a cost MRA of up to $226,160 and direct MRA staff to prepare the necessary documents between MRA and Rivera to be executed by the MRA board chair.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
Ruth is seconded. Any further discussion or any, Jill, would you see if anybody wants to make a public comment? And
Sure.
let us know if we do. And while we're waiting for that, I want to join Melanie in thanking you all for clearly, a great amount of work that you put in to get it up to this point. And
Well, we appreciate the support of.
and then I got to know Rob, where are you?
Sorry, I'm in Olympia, Washington, on my way to a meeting at Port Townsend. Sorry.
It looks like a nice day there.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful.
I don't know if I've ever not talked to Rob in his car.
Get around a lot.
It works great. That's one of the, we miss getting together and seeing each other, but this is one of the neat
Zoom kind of makes things a little more efficient sometimes.
Yeah. Any, Joe, I take it there's been no public comment?
I'm not seeing anybody raising their hand. No.
All right. Anything else from any board members? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None. Again, thank you all. We look forward to hearing how things are going. Anytime you want to come to us and give us a progress report, that's something nice.
We will do that for sure.
Well,
We look forward to seeing you.
I'm mindful that we will see them again when they come for requests for paying for those streets that go through.
Right. Well, that's it. Yeah. Well, I guess we're looking forward to that too.
Thank you very much to the whole MRA board.
All
Yes,
right.
thank you very much. Bye.
All right.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks.
So the next item on the agenda is that I need to go back. I apologize. We have some minutes to approve and I just skipped right over that. So Let me go to those. I guess February 26th board minutes. Are there any additions or corrections to those?
I'll move to approve.
Okay, and is there a second?
Second it.
Okay, any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None. We will now, I apologize for that. We will now move on to the county elections complex. And Ellen, you're in charge of this, and the folks from the county who are here can join us on picture.
So we've been working for several months with the county folks, specifically Dory Brownlow, on the improvements that need to be made to the property that the county bought on Russell Street, that's already currently in use as the elections complex. There are a number of, I mean, as I said in my memo, they bought the property from Western Montana Mental Health, who I don't think owned it for a very long time, but the long-term owner was Plum Creek, and the way they use the property is very different than the way the county will use the property for public interface during elections. So there are a number of improvements that need to be made out there. We're always and have historically been receptive to and happy to work with other taxing jurisdictions on needs that they may have that are within our urban renewal districts. Granted, when a district terminates, they see a benefit from all of the investment and the increased taxes, just like the city does, but they forego those funds during the life of that district. And we've helped the county on numerous projects over the years, as we have the schools and other taxing jurisdictions. So that's kind of one of the kind of basic tenets of how we get involved in projects like this. And because they're publicly owned buildings, of course, there's a whole lot more latitude as to how TIF funds can be used. They can be used for bricks and mortar. They can be used for site improvements. They can be used for public improvements. But the big difference is kind of the bricks and mortar that are not eligible for strictly private benefit projects. One of the big things that the use of TIF funds, if you approve this request, accomplishes is that, as I pointed out in the memo, this project is on one of our major arterials and one of the corridors that was recognized in the design excellence regulations as being a very important corridor in the city that should be compliant to the degree possible with the standards in that those design excellence regulations. County doesn't have to do that. They're higher on the food chain than we are, and there's a process that they can go through the Board of Adjustments to basically make a public declaration that they're not going to comply with certain regulatory elements that the private sector would have to comply with. County has gone through that process, and they can build this project from the city regulatory standpoint, just exactly the way they originally proposed it. We sat down with various people from the county and their design team, and with the folks in development services, now called Community Planning and Development Innovation, CPDI, who review all of the projects for compliance with design excellence. And we kind of work through, how do we make modifications to this site to bring it more in line with what design excellence is trying to accomplish. And because TIF money is going into this potentially, then we have some ability to help the county think about how they want to comply with all of that. And we've done that. We've gone through a process. You've got some before and after site plans in your packet. And I'm going to let Paul Filicetti with A&E Architects actually walk through some of those changes. But I will say that I think that those changes have made a vast improvement in terms of interface with the public and with the public realm from where the project started out. It's a lot of money. It's over $700,000. These improvements will be done over a period of 2 to 3 years. So we can stage that money over a period of 2 or 3 fiscal years with respect to the district. So it doesn't put an undue burden on District 2. I think I mentioned in the memo that, we've got around $600,000, and that was as of our last board meeting. I haven't had a chance to look at Jill's numbers for today, but we have money in the district that's unobligated, but we also, our estimated revenue for last fiscal year, the fiscal year that we're currently in, was in excess of $3 million, and there's no reason to think it won't continue to be along that order of magnitude. We have a lot of projects that we want to try to accomplish in ERD2 in its last 10 years. But we've kind of looked at all of those in terms of what might be bonded, what might be out of cash, what has priority, what doesn't have priority. And this project is certainly doable within our financial constraints within the district. And it's a huge benefit, I think, to the citizens of Missoula. One of the main impetuses for some of these improvements is to make that site both externally and the buildings internally more accessible to our citizens who may have some disabilities or some challenges getting around. And we all know we're an aging population, and that certainly plays into this. It creates some more convenient parking. We're not always thrilled with more asphalt, but in some instances that makes some sense. And it also provides a public meeting space that doesn't exist in that neighborhood. So with that, I would ask Paul to kind of grab the screen and walk you through the graphics. And then I'm happy to add anything that needs to be added or answer questions. And Dory and Paul and some other folks from the county are here to do so as well.
Okay, Paul, you there?
Awesome. Thank you very much. I'm sorry I do not have video, so I'm just going to launch into this presentation and ask Casey and Dory to jump in wherever. So we're talking about the Missoula County Election Center site redesign. And just to give you a little bit of background, here's the site on Wyoming and Russell, and it consists of 2 buildings, the elections office, and then there was a warehouse back here, which is the election center. This building is already undergoing a renovation process right now, and it's a large, it will be in the end 2 large conference rooms spaces, both AD accessible with AD accessible restrooms in each side of the space, but joining doors so that the buildings or the 2 spaces can come together. And I'll show a slide later on here of that floor plan. This is where we started, and this is actually the plan that we have currently permitted for the work. So you can see we start out with a nominal amount of parking, new access onto Russell Street there on the left, down here, and then leaving some open space on the south side of the site. This would be the election center and the elections office, leaving this corner open as well. Through the process of working with the county a little bit further, it turns out that that wasn't going to work very well given the way the building interior was going to be used. I'll just go through this quickly. Right now there were 2 large garage doors on the north side of the building here and here, and there was another one here. Those have all been removed and replaced with aluminum storefront windows and ADA operators on the doors, ADA accessible doors at grade, meeting all the accessibility requirements required by code. So those conditions were one. The other one was developing some ADA accessible restrooms to serve this portion of the building, and then additional restrooms down here to serve this portion of the building, which are here. A new ADA entrance on the south side, we call this the south side of the building, is the north side of the building. But on the south side of the building, there'd be a new ADA compliant entrance here facing to the west onto Russell Street. So all of those entrances kind of are based on the original storefront, or based on the original garage door opening size. So lots of glazing and then the double entrance doors. And as I mentioned, they're all ADA compliant and at grade. So that was a real big goal for both the county and more specifically elections, just in terms of meeting the needs of the public. You can see here the space is laid out in two different arrangements. And this just happens to be in the event that there were an elections process going on. But as well, these could be two large conference rooms for over 100 occupants in the north side and 80 occupants on the south side. So something else to consider. This room over here is an addition to the building. Right now it's a loading dock that Plum Creek used. It's a below grade loading dock, which has actually been removed already and is being infilled. And there'll be a new structure built here that will be used as a storage facility for the most of the time. And when elections come around, it'll be used for a warming facility for people to queue in to the overall elections facility, so they can queue into here and wait in this area in a sheltered space before they come in to the building and go through the elections process. So that's just in general some of the way the building is used. And all we're looking at here is just the elections center, which is this building back here. The elections office right now is not scheduled for any scope of work on the interior. And here you can see an early sketch we did showing, at that time, maximizing the parking, but showing the building renovated with these entrances I mentioned earlier. And this access off Russell Street here. In this scene, the idea was maximize parking. The public use of the building requires a tremendous amount of public parking, public access, ADA compliance. We're dealing, as Ellen mentioned, dealing with the aging society. So that was a really big goal in the whole design process. Once we got through that and recognized that, hey, talking with CPDI and specifically development or design excellence, and reflecting back on trying to really meet a few more design excellence goals, we came up with this plan, which was a little scaled back from the concept drawing I just showed you. So now we've added a landscaping area out here with turf and trees, additional trees and landscaping around the site. At this point, we are not providing landscaping here, and nor landscaping down here in the southwest corner of the building, and the bus stop is right here, so Russell and Wyoming for orientation. Still hitting some pretty high target goals for parking and accessibility, still trying to join the site with this public sidewalks on both the north and the west, but it was just an opportunity to kind of come into compliance more with DER requirements, but still meet the county's requirements. Following that, we met with Ellen and looking at MRA as an option to come in and make some site improvements. And as Ellen pointed out in her report, we've developed this in terms of 3 plazas that are specifically geared to the public face of the project. We'll start up here on Wyoming Street on the east end. There's a small plaza here. The red lines equate to a bench. The blue square here, which is a little bit difficult to see, is a garbage can. And then there's a red rectangle as well, or red square, that equates to a light fixture. And I'll show you what those components mean later on. But just so you get an overall picture, create some sort of a small plaza here, thinking that'll help define entrance as people come onto the site as they're walking onto the site. Create some sort of entrance point so it's a recognizable point that's different from the rest of the sidewalk you just walked down. And then here's a greeting point where both staff from the elections office and election center could go out and take a break from the activities that are going on in those buildings, but as well it's a place for the public to come in and just if you're in line waiting, you can have a place to wait or just take a moment off the street. So there are 3 benches in here, and there's lighting as well at that location. Following down the street, come to this area, and I'm going to show a larger drawing of this later on, but there's another larger plaza here that really, the intent here is to really engage the street, allow people to circumnavigate the intersection, come up, step away from the intersection, and come into a more protected area, benches and lighting, and yet still engage that street so that there's some sort of an impact out there for, as people look to this site, they see a change, and it was a place for perhaps some signage, low-grade signage that could occur for the election center. And then moving down Russell Street, we have an accessible entrance here that engages directly onto the sidewalk in front of this tree line that's already in. There is a electronic pedestal sign that the county has already purchased and is installing here, and we've proposed additional landscaping around here and the sign. This would be low-grade landscaping, very low to the ground, but still provide that screening towards the parking area that would be required. And on the south side of the site, another plaza area just behind the existing bus drop-off. So that would include a bench and a light fixture as well, and additional low-grade landscaping plantings that kind of join that to the areas north. So that's kind of the site redesign that we're at this point. In terms of some details around there, each one of these plaza areas gets some different paving treatments, and we're looking at some stamped and colored paving. You can see here the bench design is a full 6-foot-long bench with fixed rails and a back. So people are invited to sit down but not lie down. Some sort of a trash receptacle that would include a smoking container on the top, on this bowl on top, similar to what you see downtown. That's specifically for trash and cigarette butts. And then light fixtures, we're considering some accent lighting using a bollard light fixtures at various locations. Every time there's a bench, we're hoping to incorporate some sort of a low-grade, low-level light to create a little bit more intimate lighting situation at those locations. And same down here. And then one of the final slides is just a larger view of this extended plaza here. The result of this is we lose one parking space overall from the design that we have proposed to through design excellence, and that the Board of Adjustments has currently looked at and accepted or reviewed. So we take out one parking space that is right here and make that go away. We add 3 additional trees in this landscape paved area that we refer to it as a plaza, and there'd be these higher retaining walls. There is a grade change here, so we'd have some ability to create a ADA compliant access and flat areas, and then ADA compliant access down to the sidewalk levels to join them together. And here's what we're looking at for treatments on the retaining wall. So some sort of a cast block retaining wall with some wall cap. The light fixtures you see here are not what we're proposing, but this gives you a general idea of the concept of the product that we're talking about for these red areas that be the retaining walls. Right now there is a existing retaining wall over here that appears to be some large timbers, cut timbers that we would remove and replace with this same retaining wall to create some coherence along that north side of the site. The one other thing to mention is, as you see in your packet, there are these areas that are set-aside areas or reserved areas that would be an agreement between the city and county for future development on the property. And Casey, you may want to jump in and discuss those.
I can be.
Yeah, the reserve areas kind of come from design excellence and their idea of reserving those areas for future.
Devote some time to talking through.
Sorry, Carl, can you hear me all right?
No, something else is going on.
For me to communicate.
Okay, one sec.
Now you're muted.
Is that better?
Yeah, it was.
Yes.
All right, sorry about that. Yeah, so the reserve areas, my understanding is come from design excellence and ideas to reserve these areas for future buildings. The idea of Russell Street is have kind of buildings closer to the street to kind of have that pedestrian interaction with storefronts and that kind of thing. So being existing buildings, we're not adding any buildings, but we needed that space for the parking, so we're not complying with the reserve area by putting parking in that zone. But through our redesigns, actually, you saw our initial design, we expanded it to allow for a voter drop-off box down in this lower section, and we just needed better traffic flow through the site to kind of make that happen, and that's why that parking kind of expanded down to the south and into that reserve area. But as we worked with Ellen, we came up with an agreement, if there ever is a future building on this site, that we will, even though the county is not required to, we will comply with that standard to kind of help go to that future vision of the Russell Street corridor.
Okay, thank you. Ellen, anything else to add?
Just a quick comment. It's not all that germane, but you might have noticed that the street furniture that's proposed for the plaza areas is the same as the furniture that we use in downtown. We're trying to get this kind of cohesive. We have a downtown look and we have what we call a midtown look. And so we've tried to bring the same light fixtures, the same street furniture throughout this kind of urban core area. When we did Wyoming Street and when Russell Street was done, the pedestrian scale lighting that was installed there, we had that spec'd as the same lighting that's in downtown. So we're trying to create this kind of urban, menu of different things that you can use that gives the areas some kind of cohesiveness. And I think, to me, this is a great compromise. And design excellence recognizes that you're going to have development in areas where there are already existing buildings that can't be built where design excellence wants them. And thus the reserve areas and the counties agreed that should they add any buildings, they will add them in the proper locations. And if the county ever decides to sell this property and it's developed privately, then the private developer is not going to be exempt from the regulations that we have in place. So they would have to build in concurrence with design excellence if it's still in existence at that point in time. So I think this is a good compromise. It's a way to improve our elections experience for the community. It helps the county with a big undertaking, as I pointed out in the memo. They paid, I think, $2.75 million for the property and have improvements to the tune of about another $3 million. And to the degree to which we can bring TIF to the table to help with this, I think it's a really appropriate use of the tax increment dollars in this district.
Okay.
Carl?
Yes.
Dave Strohmeyer would like to make a comment.
Okay, and Jill, who's sharing the screen?
I think if Paul could stop sharing, that'd be great.
There we go. Okay, is Dave here?
I am here. I apparently do not have access to display my screen, but I can
promote you, Dave. 1 second.
Dave, you need to be promoted.
Yeah, we have no idea what you look like.
Yeah.
You're just not everywhere, Dave. You should be coming through. There he is.
Commissioner, nice to see you. What can we do for you today?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I need to bail here to another meeting shortly, and I'm not sure how long you'll be deliberating. So I just wanted to, first off, thank you for considering this proposal today. I can think of no function of local government more important than elections. And we have tried hard in the past and will be continuing in the future to set the standard for elections excellence in the state of Montana. And part of that, and we've heard some of these phrases again and again throughout today, but part of that for elections is accessibility and transparency. And that does not just end at the internal functions of conducting the electoral process and elections, but we see that also being manifest in the built environment. We chose carefully where we wanted to locate our elections facility in Missoula. Thankfully, this property opened up, which is really ideal. It's at the center of our community. It's along one of our major trail systems. It's along our beautifully renovated and reconstructed Russell Street. And so we are just delighted to see what we can do in partnership with MRA, the city of Missoula, to really embody that sense of excellence, accessibility, transparency in the physical space that we call this Missoula County Election Center. So I will stop talking, and I'm sure you have plenty of questions for our subject matter experts here today, but thanks for your consideration.
Well, before you go, let's see if anybody has any questions for you. I know I do, but does anybody else? So Dave, the big question I have is if you get the building across the street from me here at the old federal building, there's no plans to move the elections office, is there?
There are no plans. This is for the foreseeable future. Our election center in Missoula County, that's not one of the functions that would be relocated.
Thank you. Anything else for Dave before he leaves? Okay, thanks, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Ellen, are you done with the presentation?
I am.
All right, questions from the board? Yes, Tasha.
A significant part of the request is related to the meeting room space. I think $330,000. And my question is two parts: does that include both meeting room spaces or just one? And can you break down why it is that is a significant expense?
So the 330,000, or Dory, you want to go ahead? So it is just for the south meeting room side. The north half has already been completed as we've kind of got underway and renovated it for the most recent election. So, but the south half will be used not only for elections, but for potentially large meeting space for emergency situations, so wildland fires or flooding. So we have big, large public meetings that maybe the Sophie Moise room in the courthouse can't hold and stuff like that. And that is just the general cost of having 80 accessible bathrooms and all the necessities in that room for that building. It was just a uninsulated warehouse before, so it took significant renovations to bring it up to spec. And it used to have an old freezer in it, is what it used to be.
Okay.
Paul, do you have anything to add to that as far as the cost? I think maybe the freezer removal was a good chunk of that too.
Yeah, certainly, this is Paul Filicetti. Certainly the demolition, actually deconstruction of the freezer was a significant part. It was large pieces. We didn't just go in and blow it away. We actually took it piece by piece apart, and then it was moved on to be used somewhere else. So that was one part. And then as well, there's a utility infrastructure that's required for elections that needs to come into the buildings. In conjunction with that, there's a diesel-powered generator for backup power and all the downstream requirements for that, transfer switches and whatnot that get built into the project. So that cost seems high when you consider the overall space, but the space use itself is very specific, which probably pushed those costs up higher than a typical office space.
Ellen, did we have a proceed without prejudice on this one?
We do not. And it's my understanding that the funding that's been requested is for work that has not been done yet. I asked that question on the front end, and that was the response. So I hope that continues to be true. If it doesn't, then I think we may be looking at a diminished request.
Right.
I will say that, and we've experienced this with other projects, even in District 2, when you're trying to convert warehouse space into occupied space, sometimes it can actually be more expensive than starting from scratch. But
no, I get that. I just was concerned when we started hearing about how expensive it was to remove, but it sounds like the freezer's already been removed and that kind of thing.
And that was what was it? That
so
was,
insistent with all our applicants that they get either to proceed without prejudice or nothing. We don't pay for things that occur before we approve them. And that's a rule that's, I think, served us extremely well.
Yep.
So are we assured that the 3:30, is it 3:30, Tasha?
so I think, Carl, in light of what's been said today, and once again, this is not what was represented when we first started talking about this, and we did talk about starting work early. Some work has been done there. Obviously, that northern space in the warehouse was already taken care of for this past election in November. But that's not what they're requesting funding for. If there's work that has taken place already that's included in these numbers within the buildings, then we will adjust those numbers.
Okay. Dory, are you clear on that?
Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Dory.
No, I mean, I'm clear on that's we have all talked about that and took out some of the like ADA door handles and things that we took that out. So everybody's had that discussion. I'm not clear on where the project is, so I'll pass on to Casey and Paul for that.
Yeah, it has been a moving target just working through this process as it is still under construction currently. And since completing the north half, we decided to keep our contractor on site to save costs that way. So they have started on the south half. So I would expect some of that 330 to be lower, and obviously we wouldn't request reimbursement for anything that was done prior to any approval. So.
And our standard motion is up to, so we're.
Yeah, and we understood that. We just had to settle on a number to kind of get the application in as we moved forward.
I appreciate that, Casey and Dory.
Yep.
All right, any other questions? Hey, Ruth.
I had a question about some of those seats. Maybe this is a question maybe for Paul. Do any of those outdoor benches, are any of them covered? I'm thinking particularly of the one that's by the bus stop on Russell.
They are not planned to be covered? No. So we were just trying to, the landscape architect who's involved was trying to provide some sort of a shade shelter using a tree or landscaping.
They're covered by a tree.
Yeah, at least so that there's some sort of shade out there, so you're not sitting out in the sun.
Yeah, I'd say it's an additional element to the bus stop that there is covered already, which has benches, so it's kind of an additional spot for people walking along the street, I would say. But it's not covered at this point.
So wouldn't get them out of the rain or the snow.
No.
But the bus shelter that's there will.
So the bus shelter itself will have a covered seating area. So this bench is in addition to.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, anything else from anybody? If not, is there a motion?
Maybe I do have a question. So would we approve this and the amount would change then if work is done on some of the pieces of this that we would approve funding for?
Well, we would approve that.
Yeah, I was wondering if we needed an amended motion, like up to this amount for.
Yeah, I think that we would add the words up to.
Yeah, I think that's perfect.
Approval request from Missoula County for up to, and then I think we've made it clear, and it sounds like the county understands that those things that might have otherwise been eligible, but which are completed now are not eligible.
And what will have to happen, I mean, as they apply for reimbursement, they're going to have to present invoices and all of the same paperwork that anybody else would have to present about work that was done within the time frame after this approval.
Right. And we can rely on Jill to be looking at those dates.
So Tasha, you want to take a stab at?
Happy to.
At an amended.
Tasha, you've been nominated to make the motion.
Yes, okay. So I move the MRA board approve a request from Missoula County for up to $750,000 and $26,334 from URD2 TIF funds for improvements that have yet to be commenced to the Missoula County Elections Complex, with the condition that the site be developed as presented to the board to be in compliance to the degree practical with design excellence standards, and that the county enters into an agreement with the city with respect to the siting of any additional buildings on the site, and authorizes the chair to sign a development agreement to that effect.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
We'll second. Are there any further comments, or Jill, let us know now would be the time. Anybody in the public who wants to comment? That we will
Right. I
take.
thought I had somebody with their hand raised with our attendees, but I don't see a hand raised now.
Well, let's get
Anybody, any of the attendees that would like to ask a question
or make a comment.
or comment? Not.
If not, anything else from the board? If not, all in favor of the motion say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None? Thank you all for the good work and the interesting project. And Ruth?
Yeah, before, is Paul still on here too? Or is he already checked out of that?
I am. I'm still here.
Because Nancy is not here, I think that somebody should bring up the question of whether or not you have, it sounds like you are reusing the freezer sections. If any of the rest of, and I'm assuming that the rest of the building is being deconstructed rather than demolished. But I'm wondering if there's something going forward for including recycling internally with the staff during the operations of the building. Has that been part of your plan? Is that being considered?
Just in terms, when we talk about certainly the building use, building embodied carbon of the existing buildings, we've done energy compliance, insulation, water conservation fixtures, low irrigation or low emitting irrigation system will be incorporated in the design. And then just in terms of electrical conservation, we removed the roof, put on a new roof, which is a darker color roof. Doors and glazing are all insulated glass, and automatic door controls, and then daylighting sensors, occupancy management, or occupancy sensors and daylighting management, LED light fixtures. So internally, the buildings are set up that way. In terms of the site, there was an attempt early on to salvage. We removed a bunch of trees. There was an attempt to have those chipped on site and stockpile them, and then incorporate them into the site. In the end, it was just not possible given the way elections use the site during elections. It was just the parking space was more valuable to them than having a set-aside area. So those went off to elsewhere to be shipped by the city. And so hopefully some of that, in terms of that portion of recycling, for the most part, though, the building is intact with the exception of the freezer, and nothing is coming out that would be in addition to a recycle or would contribute to landfill.
Okay, Carl, thank you for that. Also, Dory, maybe you can answer this. That there is recycling centers set up for internal operations, like for recycling any paper and glass, aluminum, things like that, plastic, whatever. Do you have recycling centers all over the county? I thought
that is the plan, to have recycling. In our trash enclosure, we included space for a recycling dumpster as well. So we'll have on-site dumpster that's specifically for mixed recycling, and then one for trash. So.
Okay.
Since we have that on site, I'm guessing they'll be setting that up once we get moved into that space.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Jill, did you have something?
Chris Lounsbury from the county wants to make a comment.
Okay, well, we've had this, so Chris?
No, sorry, Carl. The only thing I was just gonna answer that question, but Casey just did, so I don't need
Okay,
to.
all right. All right, well, let's move on to our next agenda item. Thank you all for the county, and then folks up for the next.
Thank you all. Appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. Front main conversion. Ellen, is this you or Chris? I'm sorry, Chris.
We trade back and forth a lot.
I understand.
Just to go back in time a little bit, I did tell Don and Kai to be prepared for a question about recycling efforts and the tenants and the commercial tenants in the future thing, and that will be in any kind of development agreement that we go forward with when we start talking about streets and utilities, I'm sure.
Thank you. I thought about that after we were done with that item. I thought, oh, I should have asked about recycling.
It's on their mind.
Front main.
All right, we're gonna
Carl, this is Leslie. I don't think you officially had everyone vote on that.
Yeah, I did.
We hadn't moved and seconded.
We didn't vote?
Well, let's do it.
Yeah, you voted.
Do it again, just in case.
You did.
It was unanimous. And if I'm wrong, someone tell me.
No, you voted and it was unanimous.
We voted,
right.
it was unanimous.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. So let's go back to Scott Street and see what we did wrong there. All right, Chris, you're up.
All right.
On Front Main.
All right. So this is another project that we've talked about several times in the past, going back actually quite a number of years, clear back into the precursor of the Front Street District, and trying to figure out a way to get the 1950s conversion of Front and Main Street between Madison and Orange Street converted back to two-way, the way they were originally designed. I'll skip all that though, and just to suffice it to say that the 2009 master plan for downtown really emphasized how important that conversion would be. In 2014, there was a MRA sponsored a feasibility study to see how that would work. And that came out with a very detailed plan on particularly the intersections of Madison and Higgins and Orange, which are all state routes. So the Montana Department of Transportation, MDT, is involved, and they actually accepted the planning effort at that time. So they have at least are well invested into this project, which is important because MDT tends to change their staff relatively often. And so prior approvals are given some credence. And they've been actually involved in the process up to this point of getting where we are today. However, since the feasibility study was completed in 2015, there's been a lot of changes along those two streets. Rome was built, 488 rooms. Some other apartment buildings in that area. The new library has been completed. We know that there will be a development of the former library site, some other condo buildings down by the river. And in the commercial section, so from Patty to Orange Street, essentially, we've had the new Mercantile Hotel, the AC Hotel, the Wynn Hotel will be completed this fall. Conflux Brewing, the parking structure was not complete when the project was finished. At that point, they had an idea what it was going to be, but it wasn't finished. And the 2019 master plan talked about different kinds of uses along the street, including at the intersection of Front and Patty, and the area, the block between on Front Street between Higgins and Ryman. So there's been some changes, there's been some forecasting, and all those things will have to be accommodated by any new planning effort with the feasibility study. Interestingly enough, the feasibility study, when I've gone through it, seems to fit with almost all those activities. So we're not starting over in any way, shape, or means. So we end up with, no, maybe not. Maybe we do. Huh. There we go. End up with a project that is based, or a design project that's based on the feasibility study, the downtown master plan from 2019, and the North Riverside Parks and Trails plan that you adopted last fall. City Council adopted a few weeks later. So all those things will be incorporated. The Northside Parks and Trails plan talks about gateways that will be using Front Street and trails that will go out from there. In this project, we would not be designing those gateways, but we would certainly accommodate them, make sure that they can happen in the future. And if there's a trail that works with Kiwanis, the Kiwanis neighborhood, we'll get into that. Along the way, we also recognized, as we were starting to prepare the RFP, that the original Front Street urban renewal plan, one of the conditions of blight in that area was the lack of connectivity in the Kiwanis Park neighborhood, and the inability for large emergency vehicles, fire trucks and ambulances, to turn around well. So they end up backing up and down streets. They end up trying, in some places they just can't get to. So there is a real problem in that area in terms of both fires and any other emergency calls that happen. So part of this, when we went out for the request for proposals that you okayed us to do in January, we added putting together or designing a connectivity and access program for that district. One of the reasons we're doing this now is that and recognizing that it touches 3 different districts: Front Street, Riverfront Triangle, and Hellgate. And recognizing that none of the 3, either singly or together, can afford to construct the conversion project. We are thinking that the new administration now, through the infrastructure bill is before Congress now, and in other highway and transportation bills that the new director of the highways and transportation have come up with, or that we'll be presenting to Congress in the future, may hit us similar to what happened at the end of the recession, when the Obama administration put together the so-called ARA program. And they immediately looked at projects that could have immediate impact in terms of employment. That's what they needed then. But I think what will happen the same way here is that they were so-called shovel ready. An example of that was the North Higgins conversion process, conversion of 4-lane to 2-lane, and with the protected bike lanes. That had already been designed by MRA. So it was shovel ready. So it could go to the front of the line and start competing very well with other projects that were being suggested. We're hoping that this will be the same with this program or this design, that will be in line, will be right up there. The worst case scenario, as we talked about a few minutes ago, would be that we have to wait a little bit longer, but we'll still have a design that works. We put together a selection team after the RFP responses were received, and the unanimous selection was HDR Engineering as the leader, and with Dover Cole and Associates as planners, and Big Sky Public Relations to provide a variety of means of communication and receiving public input. HDR was the author of the feasibility study. Dover Cole was the author of the downtown master plan and the North Riverside Parks and Trails plan. And Big Sky Public Relations is highly regarded in being able to put together programs like this. They've been involved in several of the state projects, such as the Van Buren Interchange, the Orange Street Interchange, Russell Street, and some others. So they're very familiar with how this is all working. The negotiated scope of services is divided into major categories, and I attached that. The service fee for all the services is $428,215, which certainly gave me some sticker shock. I'm sure it does you too. But then if you sit back and think about it for a minute, most programs in terms of percent, or most projects in terms of percentage of estimated construction cost are in relation to design are much higher. This is a much lower number than what you would expect in a 10 to $15 million project. So we are actually, it is actually an appropriate price and a good price for us. So the staff recommendation is for the board to approve the RFP selections committee's recommendation and authorize the chair to execute a contract with HDR Engineering in amount up to $428,215. There's members of HDR and I think Big Sky Relations here, and they can answer questions.
Chris, you had two other screens on your
Oh, do
PowerPoint. Just wondering if
I was going to say, well, we end up with, okay, I've got something happening wrong.
No, I just wanted to make sure we didn't miss out on information that would be helpful.
Okay, that's interesting. Not quite sure why it didn't come up. No, you're not. It just showed the list of the team members who are actually going to be doing the work, and there they are. Sorry about that. On my screens, it was working just fine. So this is the team. I wanted to mention that the people from HDR that did the feasibility study are the same people that will be working on this. And I think the relationships that they have in that neighborhood and with MDT regarding this project and others close by are going to be invaluable in this project. The other one that I was looking at was the fee schedule in case there was any questions. So I don't have.
Okay, questions? Ruth?
Yeah, I actually did go back and look at that report that HDR did in 2015 because I remember when they presented that specifically to City Council. And one of the things that was in that report at the time, well, there were several that were very important, one being safety. At that time, in 2015, most of the accidents in that area were occurring at the corner of Front and Higgins and Main and Higgins. So those one-way streets as they intersected Higgins. But one of the other things that was included in that report was an economic development component that showed that that a typical increase in retail sales could be expected of like somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 to 13%, which is, you know, significant for some of those small locally owned businesses. I would imagine that that's maybe changed and, you know, could even be exceeded by the new developments that have already gone in there. And I don't see an update on the economic development portion of it in the new scope of services, but I assume that if we were applying for any federal funding, that would have to be in there. So could you confirm that, Ellen, for me, or somebody? Or
You're
Chris?
right.
Chris, I'm sorry, Chris.
That's all right. I was waiting on Ellen too. So,
well, she was waiting on Chris.
Sorry.
There is not an economic development portion of this program, of this project. We're just relying on the previous one. You're right, though, in terms of putting the best application together for funding. That would be a good idea to update. I don't know if we'll be able to add it to this project, but we certainly could be working on that with Dover Coal.
So if
Dover Coal does talk about it in the master plan.
Yeah, and if I could jump in here real quick. The other thing is that we're going to have the Higgins Avenue planning process going on simultaneously with the engineering for the Front and Main conversion. And I think Aaron Wilson's about to finalize the contract for that. And at our insistence, it actually does have an economic analysis component to it. With Leland, the same group that I think probably did the original front and main conversion. So it would be simple enough if we need something beyond the analysis that's going to be done on Higgins, and Higgins will have to take into account the two-way conversion, then we could piggyback on that and get that. But I think between what was done with the original front main conversion study by HDR and what will be done as part of the Higgins Avenue reassessment, we should have that pretty well covered.
Okay, thank you. Because, you know, a couple of times today we've mentioned some of the original findings of blight, and I don't want to lose track of the other charge that we have as one of the reasons for having tax increment districts or urban renewal districts is also to create economic development, not just to eliminate blight, that there's a second objective that we have. One other thing about that 2015 study had to do with, excuse me, the particulate count and the change in the safety of the air. So at that time, they assumed that there would be actually a lower amount of particulate counts. I'm not sure how that's going to play going forward. If I don't know that it will actually be lower, because there might just be that many more people coming downtown, but hopefully we're creating opportunities for them to use alternative transportation and not have a major impact on air quality.
There's three things that are already built into this. First of all, they will be working with Mountain Line to locate or relocate, depending on what Mountain Line wants, either the same or additional bus stops. Currently, there are quite a few in that area because there's a large residential component there, as well as the MCT does have a draw for that. So that's a part of it. The bike ped portion of this will be something else that they're going to have to take a look at. That was something in the newer downtown master plan 2019 that emphasized the possibility, or had recommended that the possibility be investigated to do protected bike lanes on either main or front or both. Main Street makes the most sense to be looking at that because it's much wider than Front Street. The right of way itself is much wider. So that'll be another thing that we're going to be talking about, as well as working with the Parks and Trails plan to enhance the ability for especially cross river traffic and people coming off the river onto a riverfront trail system onto Front Street. So I think in terms of enhancing non-motorized transportation, that is built into this.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, others? So the question that I have is, I mean, this is all sort of done in anticipation that there'll be essentially federal money available for this. And I know, I mean, what do we know about that? Is this the right time to be doing this, or do we, I just, it's a big ticket item, and if it sits on the, how long is the shelf life of something like this? If the money's not immediately available. I mean, the money isn't immediately available. We know that at this point, right?
Well, in the time, go ahead.
Well, we could have done this at any point in time. We need these engineering drawings at some point. We need to really understand what the cost is. And we can't put the money together to get this done with or without federal assistance until we have a lot of questions answered and actually know what we want to build and what it's going to cost.
Ellen, let me interrupt just ask a technical question. And we don't know that until 100% drawings or 50% drawings or what?
We probably will have a pretty good idea at 60 or 70%. Tim, you might want to jump in here on this, but typically you're pricing. we've got cost estimates that came from the concept drawings that were done previously. We think those need to be refined a lot.
Okay.
But Tim, and also this idea of shelf life, I think what's going to happen out there is not likely to change drastically, whether it's today that we're designing it or in 5 years.
Okay, well, yeah, that was a question.
I think John or Tim has jumped off.
Tim's on.
No, he's
I didn't see his
I'm here.
name. Okay.
Yeah, I can add to that. I agree with Ellen. Each step along the way is additional refinement. You get some of the big ticket items out of the way sooner. So 60-70%, you have a pretty high confidence level of what the overall scope looks like. But as far as estimates and other stuff, I mean, there's definitely some contingencies because all the I's haven't been dotted and the T's haven't been crossed. So there is importance of carrying it forward and having that defined scope and a well knowledgeable estimate of the construction costs to be able to really help refine and have a good certainty on what it's going to take to complete the project. As far as shelf life and the other things, you can put the drawings at the shelf at really any level. The further they are complete, the easier they are to just do a quick dust off and make them ready to go when that funding becomes available.
And I will add that this continues to be the #1 priority for the Downtown Master Plan Implementation Committee. And we talked off and on about the wisdom or the need to do this before this new master plan was done. We knew that we needed to refresh or rethink the master plan because of the age of the first one. And decided to wait until the new plan was done and understand what the recommendations of that were going to be. Should there be something that didn't acknowledge the importance of doing this conversion to two-way streets? So I mean, from our perspective, this is money well spent. It's a lot of money. We've got 3 districts to share it. I mean, it's not a project that's going to be easy to fund. So to position ourselves to be able to take advantage of any unexpected funding that may come about because of the new administration and the infrastructure bills is, to me, money well spent. Otherwise, we may never get this done.
Okay. Yes, Ruth.
Me again. Well, two things. I know that there's always been that concern from the Kiwanis Park neighborhood that Dan Camus, our former board member, used to particularly talk about how this conversion would affect the residents as opposed to the commercial entities. So I know that that's being answered, but I recall that there have been some letters to the editor, of the Missoulian, although I don't remember exactly what the objections were. I know that there have been some objections, and I'm wondering if those have been addressed. Although I'm sorry, I can't tell you specifically what they were, but I'm assuming that Ellen and Chris have also been reading the letters to the editor in the Missoulian, so I'm hoping that they're aware of those objections and are they being addressed, or are they simply whether or not it's being paid for by the MRA? Is that the only?
And I recall some people saying some things, but I don't recall what their objections are either. I certainly think we're going to find out, because the public portion of this is focused on that neighborhood and the commercial neighborhood. So there's really two parts to the communication plan. One will be the commercial entity, and for the most part, for a good portion of it, that there's 2 or 3 people that, 3 or 4 people that they can talk to individually. Plus, most folks have a presence either with the MDA or something like that, and they'll be involved too. So I think one of the key folks right on the edge of that will be Todd Frank. I mean, he's undergone dozens of changes of Front Street because he's tried to do business there over the last few years, and this will be yet one more. But in talking with him, he is in full support of the two-way because it increases his ability to interact with people that are parking right in front, not parallel, going the wrong way. And you know, it's a kind of it will work out better for him, especially if the streets are fixed and the curbs are made ADA compliant. But a good portion we already know is of the comments are going to come out of that neighborhood. They're going to want to know about traffic, how folks are going to interact on the trail system because they're concerned about the amount of bike and trail traffic, consolidating that, and into that's what the Gateway project will do, and how that interacts with Front Street is going to be real important too. So traffic is going to be their number one thing, and there will be other issues, noise and so on. Right now, there are on the eastern, probably 2/3 of that site, there are 2 entries into that area. One of them is actually a private street. So, I mean, I don't think there are going to be huge changes here. We need to make sure that fire trucks have the ability to turn around somewhere, or either that or pass all the way through. And that may include working with the north side of Kiwanis Park, which sounds simple, but there's other issues involved there in terms of land and water conservation rules and so on. But I think the changes that we'd be talking about here are somewhat simple, and it's going to be up to Christine and her folks at Big Sky and HDR and folks from both the transportation planning folks at the city and MRA to help work through some of those problems. It took a long time before, and Dan is also on the list certainly for a call, because people come to him, talk to him about their issues, and knowing that he has the ear of folks that can maybe do something about it. But Dan, I think it took a long time before he finally got the idea of how the two-way traffic coming into downtown actually aids in the ability for folks coming across from the university neighborhoods or out of that neighborhood to approach downtown and not be going down on a bicycle, not going the wrong way in traffic or on a sidewalk. So I think this, from a safety aspect, is one of his big issues, and I think he finally came around to understanding that, but we'll find out.
So I think one of the things that this does, which I think is really important, because we, over the years, since this original planning was done by HDR, over the years, we, about every year or 6 months or a year and a half, we get an inquiry from the residents of that neighborhood around Kiwanis Park around, what are you going to do about us if this goes to two-way traffic? This will answer those questions. I mean, this is, in my mind, maybe the most important part of this undertaking is how do we deal with access in and out of that neighborhood? And so to give them something concrete that we can just, other than saying, well, we're going to take care of it when the time comes, which is not terribly comforting if you live there. This will give us concrete plans. And it's, in fairness to them, they're entitled to that, especially with it being such a high priority from the downtown master plan perspective.
Okay. Anything else?
Thank you.
If not, is there a motion? Come on, Melanie, this is your favorite project.
I can go ahead and move. I think I just got it. I will move that we approve the recommendation of the RFP selection committee and authorize the chair to execute a contract with HDR Engineering in order to complete the services listed in the scope of services negotiated by MRA staff related to engineering and design of the Front Street, Main Street two-way conversion and Kiwanis neighborhood access and circulation design project at a cost of up to $428,215 of payments to be based on documented hours worked, materials used, and expenses listed.
Second? Somebody? Tasha? Okay. Joe, is there any public, now's the time for public comment, so we'll give that a minute for people to decide if they want to do that. Any other comments from the board? My question is have we looked at the, I know it's a preliminary and it's not happening the way it was introduced, but have we looked at the introduced infrastructure bill to see if there's this kind of sort of a shovel-ready kind of a criteria in it?
It's my understanding right now that the funding categories are within the bill, that the actual programs that would enact those categories have not been ironed out and probably won't be at the congressional level. That's just what I had been given to understand. Tim or his crew may have heard more.
Yeah, I haven't seen a lot of detail on the overall categories. There is a very recent notice of funding opportunity for the BUILD program, which is now called RAISE. And it's going to have a focus on some opportunities here that I do believe this project actually could be very competitive with for an opportunity like that, such as providing for disadvantaged neighborhoods, low-income neighborhoods, equity for access, as well as climate change opportunities as part of the criteria associated with those applications. So that is a very recent notification of funding opportunity that came out from the USDOT.
And is there any notion, do we have any notion that the State Department of Transportation's opinion has or will or could change as a result of the change in administration?
I mean, the main reason we did the project that we did several years ago was to work with MDT to establish that levels of service at the intersections with their state routes would not be adversely impacted. That was the result of that study. There's nothing that's happened in downtown that should modify that. And Tim, correct me if I'm wrong. So we feel like we have a green light from MDT on this.
Yeah, absolutely. There's going to be definitely some coordination and additional, review and collaboration with MDT, but feeling moving forward that they are a partner overall on the project with this.
And you're feeling comfortable with that too, Tim?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right. Okay.
Fortunately for us, this will stay pretty much in the engineering level and the traffic safety levels, and I don't know that it will shouldn't percolate up into political appointed offices, because I don't think it's that big of a deal for them.
Joe, if not, anything else from the board? All right, all in favor? Oh, sorry, Ruth.
I'm sorry. I was just looking at the motion, and I meant to go look through the memo itself. But just to be clear, that this funding would come from 3 districts. Is that correct? Not just the Front Street district, but it would come from a combination of the 3 districts that are part of this general study area.
Yes.
Okay.
Jeff, is there any reason? There's no reason to amend the motion to make that happen, correct? Okay.
Oh.
All right. Anything else? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None? We can move on to communication plan. Ellen.
I will say on the Front and Main project that the boundaries of particularly the Riverfront Triangle District and the Hellgate District were crafted around making sure that Front and Main conversion could have at least 3 funding sources if and when it came to fruition. So that's been anticipated from day one. So MRA Communications Plan Amendment.
MRA Communications Plan.
So we contracted with Six Pony Hitch to create basically a communications plan for the MRA to be able to talk with citizens, electeds, et cetera, around the use of TIF, how TIF works, what we do as an agency, and you all are all aware of that. Part of that plan and the basis for that plan has been and continues to be a series of interviews with you board members, MRA staff, select city staff, community members who are stakeholders or who have interaction with the agency in terms of projects, people who are proponents of the use of TIF and the way we use it in Missoula, people who are opponents of that. We've tried to get as broad a cross section as we can possibly get in terms of input and really understanding where the understanding gaps are in the community, where we need to be, be more educational or engaged, what the opinions are, just understand what's going on out there. Frankly, in talking to Spider, who's with us today, and she can elaborate on this, almost everybody that she has interviewed has suggested 3 more people she should interview. Now, that doesn't mean we should interview that many people or that all of those suggestions are necessarily valid. But I think there is a desire to make sure that we have credibility at the end of this process, that we have reached out to the entire spectrum to the degree possible of how much people understand about TIF and MRA, what their opinions are of how we should be using those funds, et cetera, et cetera. The original scope of work had $24,000 as part of it. Well, let me back up. The entire contract is for $46,500. The interviews are the front end of that process. The original scope, I believe, had $12,000 in there for, $24,000 for interviews based on an assumption of roughly 24 interviews. There have already been, as I understand it, 29 done, which the firm is willing to absorb, but there's still a list of a number of potential folks that have been suggested by some of you, by the mayor, by citizens that have been interviewed. And so Spider and I have talked about this, and I suggested that we simply ask for an additional $10,000 with the understanding that we may not need that entire amount, but we don't get 3 more really good suggestions and have to come back to you again, for example. So with that, I'll let Spider talk a little bit about what she's done to date, where we are in the process, and what kind of input she's gotten and where she thinks deficiencies might be in that input. And I will say that, we've had some folks that have chosen not to be interviewed, either overtly or by lack of response. And by and large, those folks are mostly people who don't agree with TIF or the way we use it seems to me. But Spider, I'll let you talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. So yeah, as we move through this interview process, it's sort of like one door opens, another door opens, another door. And I want to reiterate that this isn't just for going to talk to somebody, the interview process. It's actually, I'm writing you guys a very large report. I think it's really important that you see, I'm trying to keep it anonymous so that you don't know who said what per se, but that with each group I'm interviewing, I'm doing a really, really detailed report so that you can read it almost like a narrative of all the information. So there'll be highlights, so you don't have to read all of that. But if you want to get into the nitty gritty and have it for a while of like, these are all the things that people said, you'll have that. So I prep for the interview, and then I do the interview, and then I transcribe them, and then I code them, and then I create, I do some follow-up interview questions with people, and then I write this whole narrative summary for you. So that's what we're looking at. I think it's really important with the community members that we do have this broad bunch of information, and I'm happy to, I was talking to Ellen, I'm happy to I'm discounting, that process so I could get more in there, but I think there's about 12 to 17 more people that it seems like we really should talk to. Mostly I want to get the people on the edges, which I haven't gotten yet completely, people who are far right or far left, for lack of a better way of saying it, who have very specific thoughts on it. There's some developers, trying to look at who's on the list. I can tell you, we don't have enough representation from our BIPOC community. I think that's really important, talking about diversity. Some more community organizers like to talk to Colin, who's running the neighborhood group. So there's a bunch of people I think that's still left. And then the mayor gave me a good list, and each of you gave me really good lists. And I wasn't able to catch up with everybody that you had mentioned. We tried, but happy to talk about who I've talked to and who specifically I'd like to talk to. I don't know if you want me to do that, but happy to answer any and all questions.
Okay, anything else, Ellen?
Just where are we in process, Spider, in terms of timing?
That was my question. Where are we in process, and when are we looking at receiving?
So I've been writing as I go. I've got all the narratives done for everything except all the community people. I've gotten everything coded and going. So depending on how many more interviews we do, it shouldn't take that much more time. I've been doing all my recommendations as I go too. So I guess it really depends on who else I'm going to talk to. If I didn't talk to anybody else, I'd probably need a couple more weeks to finish it up. All the writing in maybe 2 to 3 weeks. There's a lot of information.
If we pass this, then what's the anticipation?
Well, again, it depends on how, maybe another month or two. It depends on how quickly I can schedule people, but it's not like I have to do all the interviews and then do the report. It's just I add them in as I go. So I would hope for another month, but again, it's people's schedules that determine everything for me. So but people have been pretty good about it.
And I will say that, a couple of you have called me and asked about this and had some questions about, well, gosh, how many people do we really need to interview? And I think that's up to us. I mean, if we want to have Spider kind of talk about in general terms or even in specific terms, the groups that she's already received input from, whether it's right or left or a developer or a realtor or just a citizen. If we want to cut it off now, I think that's fine. As I said in my memo, I think our end product is going to be as good as the front end input that we have. And so if we're really missing some segments that are germane to the recommendations, then we need to grab those for certain. But, do we really need to interview 20 people who think TIF is the greatest thing that's ever happened? No, we don't.
So I will say two more things. One, I have not gotten to the point yet where I'm having interviews that are just saying the same thing. I find new insights in every single person I talk to. I haven't tapped out, I would tell you. And also, I'm finding that the outreach itself is helpful. Just the fact that I've asked somebody to interview is changing perceptions, that they get to talk about it and feel like the MRA is really interested in what they have to say. So even for no other reason than that, it's having a huge effect, I can already tell. So.
Yes, Tasha.
So if we were to stop the interviews now and get the report from you, is that the deliverable that would fully expend the 46,000, or is there still room within the allotted or the estimate for other deliverables?
You're asking me? Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, is that what we're going to get, is just a report, or is there room in
you're
the
going to get a
budget
communications plan too. So that's what the rest of it's for. So putting together like I'm going to give you a whole recommendation about the website. There's a lot of recommendations and, in detail, like do this, do that, do that. So.
Okay.
Ruth, Tasha, you done?
Yeah.
Ruth.
A follow-up to Tasha's question, which was sort of where I was going anyway, is then implementing the plan would be an additional either time or expense for staff, board. What can we expect there?
Yes, there will be implementation. So right now, there's a question that I'm giving you some options about. A lot of people really believe there needs to be somebody who implements this, whether it's an MRA staff person or a city staff person moving forward. I mean, that's going to be that's a giant discussion that I'm addressing in this. Some things are easier to do, but yes, there's going to be time for somebody to do it. Some things are really easy. There's also, I'm going to give you a list of things that people talked about in terms of process for you to consider that's beyond communication a little bit. I mean, I have mountains of information for you. So I'm trying to distill it all down. People have been really, really helpful. You know, there's ideas of reports or data that people want. There's, so yeah, there's gonna be more, but I'm going to try and, you know, I'm going to prioritize it, what I think is most important for you to do and what's like immediate, what might be something you consider later. But I will tell you right now, the biggest expense would probably be who's gonna coordinate it.
So there will be ongoing expenses, and sort of to answer Tasha's question, then that will not be included in this original contract. But I also would like to add, as long as I have the floor, that I have talked to a couple of people who mentioned to me, that they were interviewed by Spider about the MRA and how great it was and that they really appreciated it.
So Ellen, when we talked about this early on with the mayor and Ginny Marion, they talked about it as part of a citywide effort from the administration to put more emphasis on you know, public involvement, public communication. Is that still ongoing from there?
Carl, I think it is. I think that we're going to be the forerunner in this, is the impression I get. I think the city still has some decisions to make, and I think the recommendations of this report will help inform those decisions about whether or not we say every department should have a communications person, which doesn't seem very efficient to me. Or do we take the smaller departments and we have a communication person who deals with those departments, but obviously police still has their own communication person because that's a whole nother animal. Parks continues to have their own communication person. But right now, you know, Public Works is not doing the kind of outreach that needs to be done. We're not doing the kind of outreach that we need to do. You know, and there are other externally focused departments that are going to need this. So I think we're leading the way, but I do think that there continues to be a recognition that this is not an MRA problem exclusively. This is a city.
So, and that's what I was getting to. So as part of that effort, does it help that we be as comprehensive as we can?
I think it is. I think it does. And you know, we're being the leaders again. And which is fine with me. I mean, I think we have the capacity to do that. And yeah, and I think that's kind of this works for us, but it also provides, I think, something of a model that can be replicated and used for other departments and tweaked for their specific needs, and may get us the comprehensive communication plan citywide that we need to really be focusing on. And just
here's a question. The other question I have is that, and this sort of, it kind of dovetails in with the Scott Street thing, that we're now that looks like it's going to be huge. And the bigger the project, the more trouble we can get ourselves into. But it just seems to me that we've been talking about this for a while. It took a while to get started, which is that's what happened. I'm not casting any blame here. And I'm willing to say, yeah, let's be as comprehensive as we can. But at some point, I guess I turn to Spider and say, look, if this is going to drag this out for another several weeks or months, let's not do that. Let's get her done and get moving. I think based upon what you've got now, it sounds like we're gonna have a lot to contemplate, a lot to work on, a lot to make it go from when you deliver it to us to where we get to figure out how to implement it. And I don't want to cut you off, but the sooner we get started on that, the better.
If I could respond. To the first thing you talked about. So there's sort of some layers of communication that I'm looking at. So then there's the base layer, right? That things are messed up, like the website, case studies, like things you just have to do basic communication. And then there's this thought of ongoing communication. How do you update the website? Do you do social media? How do you do that? And then there's sort of the proactive, like the next layer is like, how do you be proactive? How do you get in front of this? And then there's also this other huge piece of community engagement. Like how do you increase that and how do you get to that? And each one of those, I think, will inform the city, and it has to, especially the community engagement piece. Like there's a lot of overlap. So you absolutely will be informing the city on how they should be doing their work. There's no way around that. It's going to be really clear. And then in terms of, I know you want things now, but I'm not looking for more work to do. I just feel like because believe me, I feel like I'm living and breathing MRA every day right now. But I do think there's some important folks that I still need to talk to. I feel like I'm still missing a few pieces. There's questions that have come up in interviews and things I want to sort of get another perspective on just before I really make decisions. So that's why we're coming.
Okay.
If we were to say we want a product in 6 weeks, could you then quantify, well, I can manage to do 8 more interviews and you can have your product in 6 weeks? And I pulled that time frame out of my ear.
Yeah, I'd have to, I could do that. I couldn't do it right here on the spot. I could figure that out. And it also depends on who we're talking to and what their availability is. But there's
the board's parameter was, we want to bring this to closure by the middle of June.
Yeah.
And just once again,
yeah, I could figure that out.
To let it run its course, and it takes however long it takes.
Right. Right.
And my point is that I'm not. I'm sort of somewhere in between those two extremes. I don't want to tell Spider how to do her job, but at some point we gotta move forward, and we know we've got a lot of data and a lot of information, and we're going to get a lot to do that. But I hate to set a hard deadline here.
Believe me, I want to wrap this up.
Maybe the rest of the board doesn't agree. I don't know. I know this is a little bit hard to swallow. It's in the sense of just making sure we're coming to the end here, it seems to me. Now others may have a different opinion, but that's my point. I'm willing, you tell us we need to do this more work. That's fantastic. You tell us, I understand. You tell us that, particularly given that it's not just our effort, it's going to be a model for the rest of the city. It's important, very important. Yes, Ruth, finish this off. Bring clarity.
Well, okay, I'm not sure this is really a disagreement with you, Carl, but whether or not it's a model for the rest of the city, I think that the perspectives, my impression is that the perspectives that Spider is aiming for are going to be valuable for our own communication plan. And to that extent, I'm inclined to agree with this proposal, that this is something that's, I think, is going to serve us well for the foreseeable future, whether or not we can immediately put it into action with the Scott Street plan or not. I think it's important to get those perspectives, to get the best communication plan possible within really a relatively short period of time, because most of the interviews have been conducted. So to that extent, I'm ready to make a motion, but.
Okay. Yes, Melanie.
quick question first. I did want to talk a little bit about the actual cost really quick. The original way the scope was structured and the contract was structured as $1,000 per interview. It just sat with me and still sat with me. So the next time we saw you, I was curious to ask how many hours per interview, like it's usually an hour, right? When you interact with someone like this. And then how many hours after that you talk about the coding, the reporting, to somewhere in my brain figure out like, all right, what was the hourly rate on because you see stakeholder interviews, you see feasibility study interviews done all the time across the city. So that's where I wanted to go next time we saw you. But it sounds like we're no longer really on a $1,000 per interview schedule with this, right? You've already eaten costs, thank you for doing that, of more interviews. And you're not saying an exact number, like we're only getting 10 more for $10,000. So just for a brief second, can you just shine a little bit of light on this, just because it's still there in my brain. And now that it's already back with a, let's do more. I just want to know a little bit more.
Yeah, I'm happy to. So for me, each interview and the report takes somewhere between 10 to 15 hours easily. So there's the scheduling, there's the prep, and the prep for me is going through and saying, okay, is there anything else I want verified? What can this person bring to the interview? For example, if I'm talking to somebody in Ward 3, I think about the specific things about Ward 3 I want to know about, or, like I think about each person and I'm not giving everybody the same list of questions. It's very specific to them. Or maybe somebody else said something and I want to follow up based on what that person has knowledge about. So there's a lot of prep that goes into it. Then there's the interview, the transcription, and then I go through what each person said, and I was like, okay, I'm summarizing each paragraph, basically. This is what this was, and there's not a lot of stuff to throw out, to be honest. People have been giving me a lot of really good information. Then I go through and it's like, okay, what's consistent? Okay, these people all talked about the need for diversity, right? So then I'll take that and I'll say, okay, so this is basic summaries about that, and then I'll go back and I'll pull quotes because I'm going to give you direct quotes from people so if you want to read those anonymously. And then if I think, oh, I don't really get this completely, and then I'll call back and I'll follow up with the interview, and then all of it comes together in this big report. So it's a lot of work.
Thank you.
Okay.
Gotcha.
Thank you for everything you've done, and I really enjoyed speaking with you. And I look forward to reading the report and your recommendations. I am frustrated, not by you, but by the fact that some of the folks you've reached out to who have voiced opposition to the program or the city or the procedures have rejected the invitation to engage. And so I did want to say that publicly because that is very disappointing to hear that. And one of the observations that I've made publicly is that many times individuals who speak out publicly against MRA have never attended a single meeting. And they appear not to have taken time to actually inform themselves as to what it is that the MRA does, the scope and limitations of the program, and that is frustrating to me. So I just wanted to say that for the record, and that is not directed at you, Spider. That is directed at individuals who are refusing to engage in what could be a very productive process. I'm torn on this because in the scope of what we have talked about today, this is not a big ask in some ways. However, I wonder if that extra money is better spent towards implementation, because I think you're going to have some really valuable recommendations. And I wonder if $10,000 could help us achieve some of those recommendations. And so I am really on the fence on this, and I apologize for that because I want to do it right, because I think it could be very helpful, not only to MRA, but to other city departments who will be calling on to help us with implementation, it sounds like. I don't know. This is a tough one.
I will say that there's a few people that I feel like I need to talk to, whether you approve it or not. I'm probably gonna have to eat it. So if I can be honest.
Don't say that, Spider. In other words, if you don't approve this, you can get a bunch of them free.
Just because I think it would be a disservice to you not to reach out to certain members of the community. There's no way I feel comfortable doing a plan where I have no BIPOC representation in the city at all. So that's something that I think is really important for you. And I think there's a few community organizers who would cause a fuss and make it clear that they weren't reached out to. So I think it would be, I'm just putting that out there. Like there's a couple people that I'm going to call no matter what you say, because I think it's in your best interest. Yeah.
I think you deserve to be paid for that. So.
Yeah. I mean, Tasha, I think that's an excellent point, but I think in the grand scheme of things, based upon what I understand we're going to need to do, I'm not sure this is going to cut deeply into that. So anyway, if there's, we lost, I hope we didn't lose. Oh, there she is, Melanie. Any further discussion? Ellen, you want to comment on whether or not you think this money better spent implementing? As the person that's going to be the implementer?
Well, I'm going to say what I said in the beginning and in the memo. I think our product is going to be as good as the front end input. And if there are literally a handful of folks that Spider feels strongly that we need input from, I think we need input from them. Okay. This is obviously not my strong suit, or we wouldn't be going through this process, would we?
Well, no, that's not necessarily true. It's obviously not something that we put an emphasis on, which is why we're going to do it. But,
yeah, and we're not going to allow you to take that Ellen, because I think we've all experienced that the problems are, a lot of the problems are generated from the outside, not the inside.
Right. And let me also say that
our priority is getting projects done and making this community better. And if we don't have time to spend a lot of time communicating with people, we have not established that as a high priority. And we obviously need to make it a higher priority than it is right this minute.
And engagement is a two-way street.
Yep.
And so, I mean, there's a lot of things that we could do to put information out there, but whether that information is received is outside of our control. And so I do have frustrations along those lines, because there is a significant percentage of individuals who do not seem open to engaging, and that is frustrating.
And I couldn't agree more. And as somebody that people do call because I'm the chair, not only have some of those people never attended a meeting, they've never called. So anyway, Ruth said she was ready to make a motion. Are we ready to have Ruth do that? It appears that way.
Okay, then I am going to move that we approve an increase to the contract with Six Pony Hitch in the amount of $10,000, with the understanding that if the entire amount is not needed for additional interviews, it will not be expended.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. Is there any further discussion? And Joe, is there anybody that wants to make a comment?
I don't see
Well, now
anybody.
it's the time, so we'll let them.
In terms of further discussion, I would add that there may indeed be some additional expenses to implementing these recommendations, and I think that we definitely need to be open to that as well.
Oh no, it's going to cost.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't have a public.
We don't know what it's going to be.
We don't really have a public information component, and we've reached the point either in size or in interest or in whatever where we have to start doing that. And it's not as Spider and I talked about this. I said this every time we talked about this. This is not about public relations. It's about making it so we communicate with people and people can easily communicate with us. And, you know, and I think all of you would join me in saying that if we're doing a good job of that, then the job we do speaks for itself. We don't need public relations. But we need to figure out if we're doing a good job of getting people information they need and making it easy for them to get us what they want us done. So unless there's any public comment?
Nope, I'm not seeing anybody's hand raised.
Aye. Any opposed?
I'm in favor. Sorry,
Oh, okay.
forgot to vote.
Oh, I think Jill was saying something at the same time that Carl was calling for the vote, and so I didn't know we were voting.
Okay, Jill was saying there were no hands raised, correct? Jill?
Okay.
All right, let's try it again. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? None. Thank you all.
Thanks
Thank you, Spider.
Thank you all.
Thanks for hanging with us
Spider.
2.5 hours.
You want to move on to first and second sidewalk project, Inez, first and second project, sorry.
To Inez, first and second sidewalk project. Yeah, thank you. Let me try to share my screen here so we can look at some of my exhibits. Yes, can everybody see the?
Yes, we can, Todd.
MRA Sidewalk Project 2021?
Yes, we can.
All right. Let's see if I can make this bigger. There we go. All right, so this is here today requesting authorization to award a construction contract for the ERD2 Inez first and second sidewalk project. And just to recap real briefly, I'll try to move through this kind of quickly. It's quite a long agenda we have here today. So we started working with WGM Group last year in September 2020 for design and engineering and construction services related to this sidewalk project. So this is the 2021 phase of the ERD2 sidewalk program, and this sidewalk project will bring pedestrian facilities to the south central portion of URD2 and provide important pedestrian connections to the commercial corridor, Russell Street commercial corridor, and also to the downtown riverfront parks and trail system. So in my
Todd, I'm sorry to interrupt. You're talking about the ERD2 Inez First and Second Street, because right on our screen it shows ERD3 Northern Sidewalk.
Thanks for pointing that out. I didn't notice that.
You're right, Ruth.
Good eye. Let's see. Let's try to get switched over here. Ah, there we go. Sorry about that.
We're not switched over.
It should be coming.
All right, we're there.
Got it?
Okay, Todd.
All right, here we are looking at a portion of Urban Renewal District 2. So I described the project area in my staff report, and the processes we went through that kind of lead us here today requesting authorization to award a construction contract. I want to just kind of highlight a couple of areas of this project. What we're looking at here is what I call the east terminus of 2nd Street. So at where we are is the end of 2nd Street. Here's the Bitterroot Trail just to the east, and to the east of that is the old UBC site. I think the International School is there now, I believe. 1st Street to the north and 3rd Street to the south. So the current, the existing condition out there is on the top here with the new design superimposed over it. So it's kind of this big asphalt paddle head, we call it. And in working through the design with a lot of collaboration between MRA, WGM, Developed Services, City Engineering, we've settled on a design of a traditional cul-de-sac, which is what we will be installing. And then all those agencies and groups have been working with the two property owners on the north side and the south side here. What that's resulted in is both those property owners agreeing to grant a 10-foot public access easement. So we'll end up with a 20-foot wide public access easement here. So we'll construct a trail connection from the end of the cul-de-sac to the Bitterroot Trail. And then we'll be putting in boulevard sidewalks on the north and south side and wrapping the sidewalk around the cul-de-sac. Another area of the project I'd like to highlight is what we're looking at here, which is a big conglomeration of mapping and overlays of aerial photos. If you try to follow me on the far right side here, this is Inez Street running north and south. 2nd Street is here, so Russell Street would be further to the west. So if you come down 2nd Street from Russell to the intersection of Inez, 2nd Street then parallels the irrigation ditch, which is here, and then bends to the north and ties into California Street. So, and what we talked about this, I think, in a previous board meetings, is that 2nd Street does not actually land or lie within a public right-of-way. It cuts through and bisects these platted city lots here. And then on the left side of the screen, there's kind of a superimposed route for for the 2nd Street through here. And what WGM has done is work with the property owners to acquire public access easements through here. So fortunately, we're only dealing with 3 property owners. In the blue, we have the city of Missoula, and then we have some Missoula Irrigation District lots. And the green is Missoula Housing Authority. And we are in the process of finalizing these public access easements. I think we're confident we'll get these easements and we'll be able to construct the public improvements along 2nd Street as it comes through along the irrigation ditch. What we're going to do is just put curb on the irrigation ditch side, and we'll have curb and sidewalk on the west side. And that was, we didn't want to get into building sidewalk on this side because it really got us into the bank of the main canal of the irrigation district and or the ditch. Generally, the district would allow us to do that, but what they say is, okay, now the city takes responsibility for that canal in perpetuity, and that's not necessarily the city's not interested in maintaining the irrigation district's canals. So we'll just have a curb on that side. And the other thing I'd like to highlight is kind of the feel-good story of this project. And what we've got is on the north side of 2nd Street, a large Douglas fir tree in the right-of-way. And unfortunately, the tree needs to be removed. We've looked at ways of trying to avoid, it's right on the edge of the sidewalk, and we're going to cut out a lot of roots. We looked at ways that we might be able to try to go over the roots and do some different types of construction techniques. And in the end, it was decided that the tree needed to come out. And so that's a significant impact on this property owner here. And so what we're doing is the urban forester and MRA have kind of worked a deal where MRA will pay to bring the tree down, which would be a normal part of the sidewalk project. And we have some specifications that the tree stem will be cut into 16-foot log lengths. Parks will then, the urban forestry will then pay to transport those logs to a milling site at the city compost yard, and the logs will be milled into beams and lumber, and that material will be used to construct park benches and park kiosks and other park improvements. And so I relayed that information back to the property owner, and she really likes that idea. Her grandfather planted this tree many years ago, and so she's pleased that the material from this tree will go back into the community for some good uses. So, and Marie Anderson, the city forester, is really kind of highlighting it as a good way for reusing a tree from the urban forest and bringing that material and reusing it back into the community. So that's kind of a cool thing. We received 2 bids on the project, which we were glad we received. And the low bid was submitted by JEG Grading and Paving in the amount of $468,000. And WGM Group has reviewed the bid, found it to be responsive, correct, and complete, and has issued a letter to MRA recommending awarding the construction contract. And so the staff recommendation to the board is to move toward the construction contract for the Year 2 Inez first and second sidewalk project to JEG Grading and Paving in the amount of $468,000. Authorize the board chairman to sign the construction contract and authorize staff to sign the contract documents to award the contract and proceed to construction of the public improvements.
Question for Todd. Motion or Ruth.
Just a comment that I'm glad to see that sometimes we get bids that come in below the estimate. So that's good.
Yeah, we're pleased to get the bid that we did receive on this project. And in fact, I have Cody Thorson and Stephen McDaniel here from WGM, and I asked them if they might kind of say a few words to the board, kind of what and we heard about this earlier in the other project, looking at the construction costs that Don had presented on the previous project. It's the same thing that we're seeing in the construction of infrastructure. So I asked Cody or Stephen if they would maybe talk about what the bidding environment kind of is currently and what we're looking at. And if one of you guys wants to jump in.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Todd. It's pretty interesting. A year ago, almost to the day today, I think we were awarding URD 3 and URD 2 phases. And right when COVID hit, we saw a big shift in the contractors really looking for public work because they were a little concerned what was going to happen in the private world. So we had excellent bids on URD 3 last year. We had 6 bidders. This year, as Todd said, we were lucky to get 2. In fact, we didn't have a contractor even show up at the pre-bid meeting, so we were a little concerned. But I think we timed it right and honestly kind of got lucky here. But what we've seen just happen in the bidding world, a lot of these contractors, especially last fall with the subdivision work and the private development, are booked up all through 2021. And we know material prices are going crazy right now, and we have projects right now that are bid ready that we're thinking of bidding and probably setting on the shelf for 2022 because there's just no availability right now, and contractors are really struggling to find labor as well. But I think on both of these projects, one, the price was a little over our estimate, one under, about the same difference. I think we hit it just right on both of them.
Thank you.
Both of these projects too, it's worth mentioning, these were kind of some of the bigger final gaps in both of these districts. I won't say final, but some of the bigger gaps we identified. Both had some pretty major landowner coordination and easements, and URD 3, we were able to get a right-of-way dedication, and we didn't think we'd be able to get all of them done, but we did. So it's a big benefit. So I think getting this out and done at this time will be a great benefit to the community.
Thanks, Cody. Anything else from anybody? If not, is there a motion?
I'll move as soon as I get it on my screen. I'll move to award the construction contract for ERD2, Inez First and Second Sidewalk Project to JAG Grading and Paving in the amount of $468,000. Authorize the MRA Board Chairman to sign the construction contract and authorize staff to sign the contract documents to award the contract and proceed to construction of the public improvements.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second it.
Second. Any further discussion? And now's the time for anybody who wants to make a public comment. And tell me if anyone.
I think it's pretty cool having that connection to the trail at the end of the Second Street.
Yeah, that was a great piece of
getting
work.
those easements was really a good deal. And plus that Second Street like curve, that's so wacky that it goes right across platted lots, and how it actually works out versus what's on the plans is kind of goofy, but so there was a lot to work through.
Cody and Todd, right?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear that.
I said if it was easy, we wouldn't need you.
Yeah, these stuff's done. MRA always gets the tough one.
Thanks for working through all of that, all those easements. And
okay,
well,
Joe,
that was a lot of work that Stephen and Cody did a fantastic job working on obtaining the right of ways and easements. So good job, guys.
Well, we appreciate it. No public comment. Any further discussion from the board? If not, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None. The motion passes unanimously. Todd, you've covered some of the last one, which is the ERD3 Northern Sidewalk Project, Phase 2.
Okay, I'm bringing that up on the screen now. Now we're on the right side here. We're the right project. Again, we worked with WGM on the ERD3 project, and we will continue to work with them through construction. I described the project area in my memo and the coordination with the landowners to get to the final design. I think the highlight that I wanted to talk about on this project is Benton Avenue between Washburn and Russell Street, the south side of Benton Avenue. So what we discovered and we found is that there's only a 30-foot right-of-way on this section of Benton Avenue. The purple line we're looking at here is the URD3 boundary, and that description for that boundary reads that the URD3 boundary is the south right-of-way line of Benton Avenue. And as you can see, it pretty much runs right down the middle of the street. So half of the street is located on private property. And Stephen and Cody, working with the property owner here, have secured a dedication of right-of-way. I think now we will have a 60-foot approximate right-of-way through here. So we'll bring the city street within a public right-of-way. The landowner won't be paying taxes on this square footage of land, which is used as basically a public road, and come up with a pretty good design for that south half of Benton Avenue. Here's Washburn on the left side and Russell on the right side. So we will have about a half a block of boulevard sidewalk. Then the sidewalk will bend into the private property a little bit, which we've secured a perpetual curb and sidewalk easement for that. And we'll be constructing some angled parking on street to mitigate some of the parking that was lost then on the private side for the property owner. And I think we pretty much come out with on the same number of spots that he had originally. And then on the corner of Benton and Russell will be improved and brought up to current ADA standards. So we received 2 bids again on this project. The low bid is Shadow Asphalt out of Missoula, $473,145. And this is the one that was a little over the engineer's estimate, $35,000, $35,300 and some dollars over the engineer's estimate. And we've talked about how we think that's a good bid to accept, given the situation and So staff is recommending that the board move to award the construction contract for the Year 3 Northern Sidewalk Project Phase 2 to Shadow Asphalt award the contract and proceed to construction of the public improvements.
Thank you.
If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
From anyone? And Cody, a little over doesn't bother you? Or it's over a lot, but I mean, the estimate doesn't bother you too much and where we are right now?
It really doesn't. You know, we submitted our cost estimate, our engineering estimate with a 10% contingency, which is right where the bid came in. You know, looking through the bid prices, there's no major impact. It's $1 here, $1 there on the curb and gutter on the asphalt. And honestly, we expected to see that at least that amount on both projects. So we were happy with the bids. Okay. And there is a miscellaneous work item, a contingency built into the bid of $20,000. So
okay,
we can work there.
All right. Anything else from anybody? Questions? If not, there a motion?
I'll make this motion too.
Okay.
I move that we award the construction contract for ERD 3 Northern Sidewalk Project Phase 2 to Shadow Asphalt Incorporated in the amount of $473,145. Authorize the MRA board chairman to sign the construction contract and authorize staff to sign the contract documents to award the contract and proceed to construction of the public improvements.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. Melanie, second. Now it's time for public comment. Jill, tell me if anyone's ready, but in the meantime, while we give them a few minutes, anything further from the board? Todd, you wowed us again. Joe, anything? All right, all in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None? Thank you, Todd. Thank you, Cody, for your work. Good work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Folks, it's 3:02. We've got at least one thing on the non-action items. Yeah.
Let's just, I would suggest that we skip the non-action items and put them off to the next meeting unless there's something you want to.
That's what I was going to suggest, unless there's something in the, we got the financial reports earlier today. If anybody had an opportunity to look at it, anybody had any questions for Jill while we got her? If not, that was a very full agenda and some very unusual and difficult things. And so I appreciate everybody's hard work and thank you again. And are we getting closer to where we can meet in person?
I think so. I hope so. Who else had their vaccination?
Me.
One other thing, the YWCA is doing their ribbon cutting for their new facility on 3rd Street, which is very large and very impressive. On May 6th, I think it is. Chris,
that's what you told me in the message. Yes.
Yeah, they're going to have limited attendance because of social distancing and all of the things we do now. I had suggested maybe a board member might want to attend, and Cindy would love to have one attend. And I understand that Ruth hears about this at home a lot.
Well, I'm going to be there anyway, so if somebody else wants to represent the board.
I can't be there, and I thought it'd be great if Ruth wants to do it. If anybody else, if Ruth's going to be there anyway, because Kim volunteered to help on the project.
They aren't going to expect me to speak as the MRA, or I mean, I will if they want somebody to say something. But let me know if I need to make a speech, because I don't do extemporaneous, but I'll do something.
They may hand you a pair of scissors.
Whatever.
Yeah, so if it's okay with everybody, Ruth will represent us there. I think it's great. Thank you, Ruth, for doing that.
Yeah.
I'll be there too, Ruth, so I'll back you up.
It's totally my pleasure. It's a great project, and it's been really meaningful for my husband to be working on that with them because, man, we believe in the mission. Great group of people.
Okay. Anything else?
Nothing in the director's report that isn't in the director's report, so we don't need to talk about that.
Okay. Anything else?
I'm sorry that we don't get to hear about the Envision West Broadway master plan, but I'll look forward to hearing about it next month.
Yeah, Annette, you got pushed off because it's 3 o'clock.
That's fine. I would just encourage you to go to the website. It's www.envisionwestbroadway.com, and you can participate virtually at your pleasure in a lot of the sessions and the final presentation session. And we're working to get the initial plan up on the website. So long story short, we felt like it was a pretty successful week and reached a lot of people, started a lot of dialogue, and we have a good starting point.
All right, and we are, let's see, remind me, where we rescheduled this one or didn't reschedule or canceled one?
We did not meet last month.
Okay, but we're on schedule. That we're just back on our regular schedule, right? So the next one's in May, and
we are.
Okay.
None of these projects that took all this time today were ready last month, unfortunately. So we had to.
Well, that's understandable. That's understandable.
They're complicated.
Yeah, they are. And
Yeah.
the guys did a great job.
Well done.
And
totally appreciate you all. Every time we meet, every day I come to work, I appreciate this board.
I'd say the same thing, but that's not really true. Not every day.
I said every day I come to work. I don't on Saturday.
More often than you think. I mean, it's pretty amazing when you look at other boards in the city and other places and how we get things done here. And I tell developers, including Dawn and Kai this morning and so on, that you guys ask really tough questions and don't hold back, because you need to answer the questions and they're going to be hard. So,
well, aren't we wonderful? On that note, actually, on that note, we have unanimous agreement that we're wonderful, and we'll stay with that. So nice to see you all, and again, looking forward to seeing you in person.
Thank you.
All right, bye now.
Everybody, thank you.